looking very bright.
You do look right, by the way.
Yeah, and it's never long enough, is it, to sleep? It's the thing. It's like I close my eyes and then the alarm went off almost a minute later, it seems. But yeah. Okay. Well, I know who he is, but it's going to be quite an interesting double act if we haven't had a chance to talk about it at all. Is there no way of getting him out for just a minute? Also, he needs to know when to arrive. We haven't seen Ragnar yet. I don't know. Hi. Yes, or at least the person in the first half's here and waiting for the other two guys for after the break. But they're definitely in the building. Who isn't? I was expecting to breakfast hall, hoping to get a cup of coffee. It's absolutely awful in there. My goodness. The old in tourist one, KGB, then in tourist. Yeah, and the woman who used to sit in the corner. I think so, yeah. Well, I suppose it's on different levels. On one level, because the client and their friends seem really pleased, really happy. So that's a job done. Yeah. Exactly. But on another level, actually, there's been really good conversations, interesting people, and the rest of it. So yeah,
Struck me as being very lively. I've been to some really dirge-like classes recently.
yeah,
Nice change.
exactly. Yeah. Hi. How you doing? I mean, two things. First of all, can I ask you to sit here? Because I'm going to sit on the end, and then. But also to introduce you to Danny Salvadori. Yeah. So in a minute, when they say time has started, I'm going to just do a quick introduction to the day, and then I'll introduce the theme of the morning, really, and I'm going to frame it in terms of how the conference so far. We've touched on lots of things, and we keep coming back to agendas around skills, talent, education, knowledge, and this session we can look perhaps in more depth at those agendas with some case studies, and then I'll just play it simple, and it'll be over to Danny, and then after Danny, over to you. But you're also going to give a sort of Tallinn perspective in that context, aren't you? So, yeah.
Okay, I'm mostly going to talk about Tallinn Creative Incubator.
Yeah, exactly. So it's quite grounded and yeah, marvelous. I guess so. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everybody. So this is what, as they say in English, this is the beginning of the end. But also, hopefully, it's the beginning of something else that goes on for longer outside of these walls. You are the people with the most stamina. You know, they're all the hardy souls, the people who are still here at the on the last morning of the conference, and I thank you for that, because there's still quite a lot of stuff to talk about. And today is the day, I think, when we start to get quite practical and grounded as well, because today is the day when we actually say, okay, so what next? Because we didn't want this conference to be a conference where we go away having had lots of nice conversations, but that still haven't really started to respond to the question, so what next? So hopefully we'll find some answers to that question a little bit later on today. And I suppose in that context, I want to just park this in your minds for now, is that we want to talk directly about the Tallinn Manifesto today. Now, as I said at the beginning of the conference on Wednesday, this is a draft document, but it was put in your packs, really, I suppose, as a way of as a sort of provocation, as a prompt, as a tool that we can refer to. But what we want this to become after the conference, in another version, a second draft, is a document that can play a role strategically in terms of creative economy development. Yes, of course, in Tallinn and in Estonia, but I think also perhaps more widely in your own specific contexts, and also to inform, hopefully, some thinking around European policy for the creative economy. And there's a parallel working group at the moment which is talking about frameworks and strategic approaches to creative economy policy, and that will lock into this conference plenary later on when we talk directly around the Tallinn Manifesto. What I would like to do in the session after coffee, and right at the end of the session, the last thing we do, in fact, in this conference, is actually ask you to respond, and you to come to the front and give some practical recommendations for the future, whether it's in terms of collaboration, in terms of intervention, or maybe it's just something that you just want to get off your chest that you've been storing up for the last 2.5 days. So the last people you'll hear from in this conference won't be me, you'll be relieved to know, it will be yourselves, hopefully. So I just want to invite you now to think about whether there's something you want to say, kind of like a vox pop, for 30 seconds, 60 seconds at the end of the day, because we'll have 10 minutes after the last speaker with a mic for you to come up and say, in the future, I want this to happen in terms of the creative economy, or I want this to happen in my city, or I really think we should have talked about this, but hey-ho, we haven't, and we're all going home now. So just think about that, and then when you've decided that you want to say something, if you could just write your name down, and just a title for that point, and then I'll have a list of people, and I'll call you up, and you can come and say something. And hopefully, some of you will rise to that challenge. But that's all for later. Before that, though, in this session, we're, I think, arriving at an important moment in the conference in that we've often, throughout the last 2.5 days, referred to agendas in skills, in training, in knowledge, in education, and actually frame those as really fundamental issues when it comes to this agenda around the creative economy. So yes, we can talk all day about business support or around market making or around the relationship between arts and business, etc. But obviously critical to all of that is around how we support talent and how we enable young people and older people to develop capacity, confidence, and I suppose credibility as creative entrepreneurs. So we're going to tackle that issue head on in this penultimate session this morning by looking at, I suppose, on the one level, broad agendas in creative education, but also looking specifically at two approaches that are about supporting talent to develop, to prosper, to grow, and also supporting creative talent to play a wider role in the creative economy, but also for the overall economy. Without further ado, it's a real pleasure to invite Danny Salvadori to the stage. Danny, I'll just get your job title right, although I know what you do. Danny Salvadori is just director, it's easy, isn't it? Director of Central St Martin's Innovation Centre in London, and a really prominent figure when it comes to creative education and the role of higher education institutions in delivering support and providing an enabling environment for creativity to flourish. So, Danny, over to you.
Okay, and I'll make the journey to the other side of the stage. And, actually, I'll go back. Right, so I've been asked to speak about how universities can be opened up to unlock their creativity. And as I come from a university, some of what I'm going to talk about is actually some academic research that really gives a picture of what actually happens when universities engage with the outside world. And then some case studies about what we actually do. And we are Central St Martin's. So Central St Martin's is the largest college of art and design in the UK, and it's part of a much larger institution, which is the University of the Arts London, the biggest, we think, university of art and design in the world, notwithstanding the fact that we don't know exactly what goes on in some parts of China. But it is a very big institution, 20,000 students studying on degree courses and 20,000 students studying on short courses. That's the whole university. And we've just moved to this splendid new building, which this is in fact not a real photograph of. This is a computer drawing, because it doesn't quite look like this yet. This is what it'll look like in 15 years' time. At the moment, we've just got the big building on the right of the screen with a building site in front of it, and we're the anchor tenant in an enormous new development in King's Cross, which is just to the north of central London, and has been a plot of land that's been derelict for decades. And we are the anchor tenant for that new site, which will take 20 years to finish. So they've entrusted this new development to 5,000 art students, which I think is quite a brave step on the part of the developers. So, how do universities engage with the economy? This is the very traditional view of how universities engage with the economy. Universities do research, usually in science. It usually involves some cells like these ones here. You put a bit of money in, you find an investor, and then you get innovation. You get all these new businesses. And that's the MIT, the Cambridge University model of innovation. And it's very much how governments think innovation happens. And that's been bolstered by some work, some definitions long overtaken, but were used very heavily by the OECD in the 1960s and 1970s of what innovation is. Now, the OECD has moved on from that, but many governments haven't. And it's very hard when you come from a creative sector to make headway into that very narrow way of thinking that governments have, that certainly the British government has. And the British government have put put their money where their mouth is. And universities in the UK have to do three things, not two things, three things. We have to teach, we have to research, and we have to do what's called enterprise, which actually means engaging with the outside world. And we're funded to do that. And I think that it's important that you understand that, because that funding has created a whole load of structures that are very strong in UK universities. And I'm not sure that that's the case in universities in other parts of Europe. Now, the trouble with that is that we're measured on the success of that enterprise, and therefore we get more funding to do it, in only one way, and that's in money. So it is only the income that we generate that triggers more income. And that is really very problematic. We have to tell the government about other things that we manage to achieve with this money, like the number of businesses started, the number of IP licenses, deals we managed to do, but we're only measured on the money. And there's recently been, in May, a new round of funding allocations. And every single creative university in England, apart from ourselves, who are enormous, and the Royal College of Art, who are very specialist, every single other creative university has lost their funding for this work, because we're only measured on money. And I think that that will have very strong consequences for the UK economy in the long term. So if you and your universities go down this route, make sure that you use some other measures apart from money. So that's the background. And as I said before, this model is predicated on the main way that universities engage with the outside world being through their research. But when you're in a creative institution, you don't actually have much pure research. What we have is lots of students and lots of staff who do teaching, but really very little academic research. And in reality, that doesn't matter. In 2008, the University of Cambridge undertook an enormous survey of how academic staff engaged with the outside world. They surveyed 120,000 academics, and they got a 17% response rate. So anybody who knows about academic research and surveys knows that that's a really high level of response. So this is a very good picture of what academics actually do. And they do things in 4 areas. And I'll talk through the 4 areas and then talk through the difference between the light and dark blue. The smallest area there, the smallest way that academics deal with the outside world, is what they call commercialization, which is the model I was just talking about before, where research plus money equals innovation. That's the smallest part. So it's about 7% of academics do work in that area. Most academics do things with the community. That might be lectures, it might be exhibitions. I'll come on to some more of the detail of that. They also do quite a lot of people-based activity, training, education, students, and problem solving. So working on problems often brought to them by business. The difference between the dark blue and the pale blue is that the dark blue is all the academics, and the pale blue is academics in the arts and humanities, so our sector. So you can see that academics in the arts and humanities do a lot of stuff with the community. So people are out there doing this stuff. The trick is to get them to engage with it in a way that's useful to you. And what sort of things are we talking about? So community-based is things like exhibitions, school projects, public lectures. People-based is things like continuing professional development and short courses. Enterprise education, educating students so that they can set up businesses. Student placements, which is a very big way that our students engage with the outside world. And problem solving is things like helping businesses with prototyping, doing things like publishing, consultancy. All those sorts of things are really very common indeed. So what this gives us is a picture of the innovation process that universities are engaged with society. And it's a model called interpretive innovation. And if you read a book called The Missing Dimension by Richard K. Lester and Michael J. Piore, who are academics at MIT, but the book is published by Harvard, it actually has a whole section at the back of that book about universities as a neutral space in which problems can be solved. It's a very interesting book because it talks about the processes that interpretive innovation allow to go on, but it doesn't really analyse them. And that's because they're engineers and they don't really know the right questions to ask. It's very interesting. It goes some way to describing what we do. And the three areas are educating people, providing public space, and problem solving. And universities can be seen, the metaphor they use in this book is as institutions or people that enable conversations to happen. So what we went on and did, and this is sort of by accident because we weren't planning to do this, is we actually have developed a model of what that interpretive innovation is. In 2008, NESTA, which is the National Endowment for Science, Technology and the Arts, funded Central St Martin's to do a very large study, it took a year, of fine art graduates from the University of the Arts London. And these were people who had graduated from the colleges of the university from the 1950s onwards in fine art. And we specifically chose fine art as the sort of purest form of cultural engagement. It's what was called a longitudinal cohort study, and you can still get a copy of this. It's on the Nesta website, and it's called The Art of Innovation. And it was done by a very interesting academic called Professor Kate Oakley, who's at City University, is just about to move to Leeds University. And we weren't expecting to find such a clear set of definitions of what interpretive innovation is, but we found it. And what we found that almost all our cohort of artists did were these four things. So they were able to cross-fertilise and span boundaries. So they used one form of learning in another form of activity. So they might have they might be a dancer and actually be really interested in Dostoevsky, this is a real example, and get really into reading all of Dostoevsky and then turn it into a dance piece. So they're always learning from one set of disciplines to another. Another thing that we found, and we found that this was really driven by the type of education that they got in art school, was that they were lifelong learners and lifelong consumers of culture. That engaging with culture, not the culture they made, but everybody else's culture, was really important to how they developed things. They were very, very tied to place. And in our case, it was London. And even though we are a very international institution, we found that 75% of our cohort had stayed in London. And in fact, many of them had stayed in the same 3 London boroughs. They hadn't moved very far. And so that the place that they had studied in and the place that they lived in were really important to their work. And also the people that they met, the networks that they set up all the way through their career. And then the final thing, and this was really striking, is that they all changed their situation time after time. They would get bored after 3 or 4 or 5 years doing something, and they'd put themselves in a different situation. It was a constant process of change. And my contention that this model works just as well if you're talking about designers as if you're talking about artists. And in fact, I use this slide to talk to the HR people, the human resources people from Chanel, so luxury brand company, and they all nodded all the way through because this described the designers that were working for the company. So I think we've got a clear model of how artists and designers actually innovate. So here are a few case studies just of the type of thing that can go on to where the institution can engage with the outside world. So this is a slide to demonstrate a research unit that we've got called Art Act, who deal with the history of art and the history of science. And there are many, many humanities, art historian researchers who write books, curate shows. What this group do is that they do it on a really big scale. And this particular poster is from a very major exhibition that was held at the Mori Art Museum in Tokyo of a work from the Wellcome Trust's medical collection that was curated by one of the academics from Art Act. It was a major exhibition for the museum in Tokyo. And it's quite a common way that humanities researchers deal with the outside world. It's not a world in which there's much money, though. That the amount of money paid by museums to academics to do this work is really very small. So if we go back to our money equation, it's not very helpful for that big pound sign that I have to meet. This is a very different way that we've engaged with our world around us. Central St Martin's, as well as our big swanky building in King's Cross, we have a building in a very, very run-down part of North London called Archway. It's where the biggest bus station in London is. It's where 3 London boroughs meet. Nobody loves Archway. It's horrible. And we have somebody in my department in Enterprise and Innovation who's based up in our art school up there. And her job is to make sure that that part of the college really engages with the place, with Archway as a place. And this is a performance that happened outside the library. What you can't see is the big bus lane going past on the right-hand side, and really how very grotty the unoccupied office building is above that library. What it's done, she's been working there for 5 years. What her work has done is 2 things. It's made the London Borough of Islington completely review how culture can be part of a place and how it can help develop a place. And they've completely changed their cultural strategy to take account of this type of work. And actually, Anna, who's my colleague who does this work, has just been invited by them to sit on a panel to give away £250,000 of money that they've got from the Mayor's office to regenerate the area. And the other thing that it's done is that it's taken about 25 graduates, fine art graduates, every year through the experience of being a fine artist that deals with place, and enabled them to come out of the college with the experience of really doing that and really working as professional artists. It's been a very, very successful project. Another way that we deal with innovation, and this is really to do with the innovation capacity of firms, of businesses, is that we do an enormous number of sponsored projects where businesses come in and work with a group of students. Now, this is nothing that doesn't happen in every art and design university in the world. They all do something which they might call a live brief or a student project. We've just professionalized it. And we do about 35 of these every year. About 25% of our undergraduates and about 35% of our postgraduates do one of these projects every year. And we charge for them too. And what they do is they do 3 things. They enable the businesses to get some new ideas, often in the form of products. They get the businesses to be able to be associated with our brand, because they want our brand, and I'll come back to that later. And if the businesses are if they put the right amount of time into it and the right amount of concentration, they enable the business to learn and the individuals within that business to learn. They also help the students engage with the outside world, but in terms of innovative capacity in the firms, that's what they enable them to do. We also do quite a lot of work with our recent graduates. And when I walked into the conference yesterday lunchtime, when I arrived from Helsinki, the very first person I met, and I don't know if she's still here, Lotta, she said, "Are you Tani Salvadori?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I used to work for the design laboratory." And she was one of our very first interns, and now she's working at the Estonian Design Council. The Design Laboratory is an in-house consultancy. We work for commercial clients. We try and make a profit. And we employ a lot of interns and freelance designers. And we don't work with students. We work with graduates. And there's a very particular reason for that. The education that our students go through is very intense. And actually, they don't really have time to do it while they're studying. And they're not really mentally and emotionally ready to think about dealing with the outside world in a consistent way until they leave. So most of the Innovation Centre's work is with graduates and not with students, outside the sponsor projects. So these are 3 projects that we've done over the years. The bottle of cognac is exactly that, a bottle of cognac. That was a whole design job about the shape of bottles, point of sale, for a new cognac designed for the African American market. It's a very large project. The middle image is from a project which has just finished. It's been going on for about 3 years with the Kappa brand holders for China, and it was to design a series of ranges for the Chinese market, but with a European sensibility. And the one on the right is from a set of children's play equipment that has been commercialized, and we get royalty checks from that. We work with some fine artists to do that project. So probably in any one year, we've got about 12 interns going through the design laboratory, and probably about another 8 to 10 going through research projects or working with my business development team. Another thing that we do is that we help our graduates be sensible about the businesses that they start. When you work in an institution where there are lots of people who make things, one of the things they really, really want to do is set up a business to make things, mostly so that they can continue to make things. And it's very, very easy to set up. It's very easy to set up a business in Britain, and it's very easy to set up a business that makes no money whatsoever. So we treat this, that back bedroom sort of business as a failure. And what we try and do is give them real practical experience of going to the sort of places where people are really going to buy things from them, the rather unglamorous set of trade fairs that go on in the UK and other parts of Europe. And we take them from when they're third-year undergraduates through the first year after leaving college, through these trade fairs. And actually, this person on the right, Karu Parry, she's been through that. She graduated about 3 or 4 years ago, and now she has really quite a successful shop, which is just starting to license the brand into other bigger shops. So the process really does work. And it's really not glamorous. We don't do any of the design festival glamorous stuff. This is, they're sharing the trade fair with the people who sell knickknacks and really rather appalling things you wouldn't want to ever look at. And then the other thing that we do, and this is the reason why we can meet that big pound symbol, and I think it's really important, is the power of short courses. So as well as the college's 4,500 students study on our degree courses, we have 12,000 students a year going through our short courses. And they're all sorts of people, from very young people who are planning to study art and design, people who've left college and want to expand their skills, through to leisure artists, who are in fact the smallest group. That's the main way that we interface with our community, and it's the main way that we ensure that the standard of training and knowledge is continues to grow in the creative sector. It's also quite profitable and subsidises some of our other activity. It also has other side effects. The tutors on these courses are practicing artists and designers as a way of keeping them in the creative economy. They often teach part-time on our full-time courses. It's an extremely successful way that we engage with the external economy. So, how do we ensure that this really happens? Because this sounds easy, and I can tell you it's not easy. There are a lot of cultural things that have to be in place. And when I first did this presentation, I knew I'd left something out, and it was Andrew's top tips for creative leadership yesterday. I thought, yes, that's it. That's what we actually do. So I went through his top tips, and I made them into a little diagram. And this is really my take on those 5 areas. So the first thing is narrative. We make a story about what we are and what we can do. And that, in other words, is a brand. We work off the back of the Central St Martin's brand. And Central St Martin's in the UK, in parts of the world, has a mythology. And we work quite hard to keep that mythology going. And we do business off the back of that brand. We represent the DNA of Central St Martin's. We really understand our place. And because of that, the academics trust us. I've been in the college a long time. I've been there 17 years. And my team has grown and fluctuated a bit, but it's not a fast turnover team of people. They know people across the college. We engage with a dialogue. It's a dialogue with the clients, and the other part of that dialogue is with the academics. There's a sense of co-creation between the clients and the academics. It's not my team doing the creating. My team put together the clients and the academics to make something between them. The people in my team guide that process, but that co-creation and dialogue are two halves of the same process. And the final bit is sustainability. We have to make money. You've already seen the big pound sign, but not only that, we're supposed to contribute to the college budget and not be a cost to it. So there's no subsidy from the college for our work. And when you have to earn your own salary, it's a great thing to keep you going. So, in summary, how do you get universities to do this? I think the first thing is that governments do have to fund and financially reward universities for doing this work. Governments have to give universities permission. And when I've been to parts of the world where this doesn't really happen, it's because that government permission isn't in place. You need the right type of people to do the intermediary work, and it's you have to be comfortable being in the middle. You have to be quite transparent some of the time. It's not your ideas, it's the people around you's ideas, the academics and the students' ideas. And academic staff and students need to be allowed to do this through curriculum and contractual arrangements. And that sounds simple, and let me tell you, it really isn't simple. It's really hard to get university management and bureaucracy systems to enable this sort of stuff to happen. And you have to have people like me who are prepared to fight against the finance department and the legal department. So there's quite a lot of background work to do all of that. So that's my thesis on how you let them universities into the outside world, and that's my email address, and you can follow us on Twitter at CSM Innovation. So, thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Do you want to...
Yeah, this way?
I think, Philip, don't want to kind of cast you adrift over there. We come back to the warm bosom of this platform. Thank you, Danny. That was excellent. And I think it's really interesting for me to hear that, because we could, in some instances, have replaced the word university with cultural centre or cultural institution in some ways, because the challenge that we've been exploring throughout these 2 days is about how we open up our infrastructure, how we repurpose it to play a meaningful role for the creative economy, and how we make the most really of the asset base that it has. It's fixed assets, but also other assets such as obviously the talent that is in it in terms of the staff, the talent that it's developing in terms of the students, and also the knowledge and the know-how and the brand as well that it's accumulated over the years. And these are agendas that I think are relevant whether you're a university, whether you're a cultural institution, and I think actually some of these agendas are actually relevant to socially engaged practice if you're a business as well. I just have one question, and I'm sure I think other people will have questions and observations, but mine is just I suppose it links back to a question that was made, I think, yesterday, which is around how you, in providing a supporting and enabling environment for creative talent, how you tread that balance between a more holistic approach to creativity, enable them to breathe, to explore their ideas, to have a kind of freedom on the one hand, but also readying them for market, readying them for sustainable careers in the future, and careers that ultimately make them money.
Well, I think that's the job of the academics. So when we're doing the student-sponsored projects, they're only one part of the curriculum. It would be appalling if those were the full part of the curriculum, and they generally happen in the second year, so that the third year is given over to the work that the students really want to do themselves. It's really important that the academics work with the business to set that project. It's not just what the business wants. They have to be mediated by the academic requirements of the curriculum. That's why the stuff about consultancy, very commercial consultancy, only happens with graduates and not with students, so that there's the space for the learning about the creativity to happen properly through the 3 years of education.
Okay. Okay. Just a supplement to that, because obviously you mentioned there's a kind of mystique to Central St Martin's, and there's a real kind of brand value that's been built up over the years, and I suppose that means that you attract and retain certain kinds of academics. And I wonder whether you've observed other institutions perhaps struggling to nurture an environment where the academics are open and
I don't think our academics are very different from the academics in other parts of the University of the Arts London or in other creative institutions. And actually, it's quite hard to attract academics, and they're all well over 40. I mean, they're not young at all. They all do other things first. So no, I think it's more about the overall culture of the college rather than the individual academics.
Okay, thank you. Question over here, just in the middle.
Thank you very much. It was very inspiring. I'm Claudia Acklin from Lucerne University from Switzerland. And of course, this is a much, much smaller city than London is. I was very interested in that point of the design laboratory. Probably in our school, we would be saying that we don't want to compete with students that just left school. So we're afraid of actually driving them out of business by setting up our own consultancy inside of the school boundaries. Is that something which you are considering too, or is this not a problem in London?
We don't compete with graduates straight out of university. The design laboratory is expensive, and we're competing with established design consultancies. And interestingly, we're mostly subcontracting to other brands. It's quite an interesting position that we're in. I think it's a free market and you can compete against anybody, actually, but lots of people disagree with me. But we're really not competing with the people straight out of college. What happens is they come and work for us as interns, and then they leave and set up their own businesses because they're more ready to do that. No, it's people who are longer established that we're competing against.
Thank you very much. It was really inspiring. I'm from St. Petersburg State Theatre Arts Academy, and I like your idea very much of taking care about your graduates. That's really very rare case, especially in Russia. My question is, what are your relations with the state budget, with the government? Do you have any support from government? And what are the sources of financing? Do you receive more funding from private, from your collaboration with companies, or your state budget partly also?
As I explained, the universities in the UK get some funding for this type of work. So my university gets £2.5 million a year for this university, for this work. But it has to be split across the whole university. So Central St Martin's gets a fifth of that, so we get £500,000 a year to subsidise the core staff. We actually turn over about £8 million a year, and the largest proportion of that is fees from short courses. The rest is a mixture of commercial income for sponsored student projects and consultancy, and public sector money largely for research and innovation activities. But there isn't very much of that money around at the moment, and a couple of years ago we decided to focus away from that, and in fact that was the right decision because we haven't had to lose any staff or make anyone redundant. Now the government measures that money, so every year we have to send the government a form that says how much money have you generated through these sorts of activities, and it's that return that generates the £2.5 million a year. So they want us to earn this money, and we're allowed to keep it. So we make that money and we keep the money. And within the university, and this is different from other universities, within the university, if the college makes the money, the college keeps the money. There's very little overhead taken by the central university.
Okay. One more question at the front, and then we need to move on.
I was wondering how you would differentiate what you do with incubator programs. And secondly, you said you're a fighter. How do you fight the governance in order to insist that you should not be measured only in monetary terms? Because I think this is a problem of a lot of us who are engaged in development work.
We're not an incubator. London is full of incubators, and it's also full of very highly priced real estate. We can't afford to be an incubator. We can't afford to have space given over to new businesses. There are other parts of the university that do run incubators. We have one quite successful one in fashion businesses. We're just giving individuals skills that they can go out and do what they want to do with. It's not a full-scale incubation process. I think the answer to your second question, though, I haven't got the answer yet. We do because of the way that the government engages with institutions in the UK, it's always or often through an arm's length institution. So we heard the Arts Council England speaking yesterday. In higher education, there's the Higher Education Funding Council for England. And our job, and I'm still musing about how to do this, is that we have to give HEFCE evidence that they can go back to government with to show that there are metrics that measure this impact that aren't money. And in fact, we did a research project to try and find some metrics, and we couldn't find any. So it's really difficult. It's a really difficult question, that. Okay, thank you, Danny, and thank you for some really sharp questions there as well. And I think this point about evidence is, again, a kind of recurrent theme in terms of how we understand, measure and articulate different kinds of value, whether it's around the role of creativity in society or the institutional value that people are providing, such as universities and colleges. We have, though, got an incubator to talk about now, though. So perhaps some part of your question can be responded to a little bit later from Anu Lomas, who's the director of the Tallinn incubator. And has played a really, I think, important role in terms of creative economy development in this city as well, more generally. So the floor is yours, Anu.
Thank you. Shall I push this?
No, just no. They'll do it immediately. Yeah.
So, good morning, everybody, dear conference guests, and I'm Anu. I'm from Tallinn Creative Incubator. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend the first days of this wonderful conference. I just arrived last night from Sweden, and it might happen that I will tell you something about you already know or you have heard during first days. But I'm happy you have chosen to be here, and those who are not from Tallinn, I hope you find it very interesting city and consider to come back sometimes. So, I would like to say a few words about Tallinn first. Tallinn is a capital of Estonia, and it is the center and heart of Estonian economy, and certainly the center of creative and cultural industries. The largest part of CI enterprises and institutions are concentrated in Tallinn, about half of them in Estonia. And I think it begins with main universities, what we have in Tallinn, for instance, Art Academy, Music and Theatre Academy, the greatest amount of professionals, and it ending up with customers. We have most of people here, we have businesses here, most of trading is done here, and this is the reason why Tallinn is a creative hotspot. And I'm sure that Culture Capital 2011 also boosted the growth and development of cultural industries, and to say that world's second best creative incubator is also located in Tallinn. But about background for our initiative. In Estonia, we started to talk about creative industries not very long time ago. And the first bigger mapping was done by Ministry of Culture and the Institute of Economic Research. And later on, many mappings and researches were done by municipalities and different institutions and by Enterprise Estonia. And by 2009, we were pretty aware of what is going on, what is the situation, what are the problematics, what the future perspectives are, and also suggestions for policies. And the main introduction actually was that most of CI areas potential is strongly underused. Governmental focus had been long time only on developing industries and IT technologies, which is very normal for young economy like Estonian is. During last 10 years, technology and science parks were established, business incubators were established, quite good measures from governmental sides for those industries, IT technologies, companies were implemented. But actually key players didn't support very much of idea of creative industries, and at least after the crisis, we realized very clearly that this is also an important sector, and this innovation is not done only with the work of scientists and technological part of industry, but also with the work of cultural people and artists and designers. And after crisis, CI became popular and many expectations on the sector were gambled on. And I think that, these researches, the CI sector was not only mapped, but entrepreneurs also were roped in and their opinions and expectations were asked. And 4 main expectations were pointed out from these mappings. First, developing a system of business support targeting CI enterprises is considered crucial. Development of various types of clusters, as well as connecting CI sector with other industries. As very important was mentioned development of creative areas, like making available space, also public space, and buildings, reconstructions of older factory and industrial complexes, or construction of a new urban area, which would make a great mix of individuals and companies. In financing models, 2 different subtypes were mentioned. First, the early stage grants, seed investments, supporting R&D, and the second includes those fiscal measures which refer to tax system like exemptions or breaks. And I think Estonian policies have responded quite well. Thanks to Enterprise Estonian CI support measure, 3 creative incubators were opened in Estonia during last 2 years. Some development centers were opened. There is an innovation share, what is available for all companies, and it enables support for working out and bringing in design solutions, product development, and patenting, actions where CI meets different areas. 1% of budget of public construction is estimated for art, as many countries have brought to bear successfully before. And this autumn, National Action Plan for Design will be delivered, and its focuses on awareness and applying of design using in all areas. So a lot of work is done and a lot ahead. And now I come to the story of Tallinn Creative Incubator. The idea actually started quite a long time ago and very originally, when one of most famous Estonian jewelry designer and Doctor of Arts come to Tallinn Business Incubator to develop her innovative idea of producing jewelry and to start business on it. And together with workshops with her, we considered that a bit different approach should be on creative people when starting business, and a different environment is needed. It is not as simple as with so-called ordinary companies. It must be something different. And the idea was introduced to Tallinn city government, and surprisingly, it was given green light. And even before we started to talk about creative industries in Estonia. That's a miracle, a bit. And 3 years ago, we started incubating CI enterprises, and a year later, the premises were opened, actually at the peak of need. And from the first day of opening, we really had very many applicants to the creative incubator. And I think we were successful in actions and also in promoting, and we also were awarded last year as the world's second best creative incubator in the world. The incubator is located in Baltica Quarter. It's quite in the center of Tallinn city. And it's the biggest fashion retail company's old administrative building. The Creative Incubator was one of the first to rent premises there. And this way we even helped a bit to create a new creative area for Tallinn city. And today this quarter bridges a huge amount of CI companies and is one of the first choices for them where to launch. We have there 1,200 square meters with 28 studios. We expanded this autumn 100 square meters because the demand is huge. The studios and offices are in various size, and those are suitable for web designer. They are also suitable for small production. So they are very flexible. And today we incorporate about 40 creative businesses. Not all of them are located in business incubators. Some of them having their headquarters somewhere else. Some may be working at home, but still they are part of the environment, and they come to have their meetings here, they come to trainings, they take part of events, and most important, they have the consultant there. And our creative incubator at first was planned for all creative businesses, but now there is a trend to be preferred mostly by fashion designers. Maybe it is a good impact of fashion retail company, then animation studios, film areas, and those who are performing in applied arts field. There is always a question how creatives are incubated, and do they tend to be incubated at all? Actually, we consider us more like business incubator, and maybe this is not a place just to have good ideas, but it is a place to get your business started and grows. And we have very systematic approach to our targets. We try to turn professional skills into entrepreneurial output. It begins with so-called pre-incubation period, with basic entrepreneurial course and studies. Then we set up goals for the idea, build a strategy, and create a business plan, and then start up a company. As a characteristic to most of creative businesses, they start alone, like micro companies. And we try to help them to find somebody with similar goals and values, and better if managerial skills, to work as a team. The grabbing of market share is never done alone. The personal consultant shares knowledges, and if the educating comes up to specific questions, then the expert is outsourced. We have regular specialized trainings, we have different interesting meetings, study trips, we try to do some joint marketing events, help attending in fairs, competitions, showrooms. We also help to build up their portfolio. And it is also very characteristic to those startup companies that they do a lot of handiwork. We try to help them to do product development and branding and set up small production to get from episodic sales to the distribution network. It's not an easy job, but is possible to do. And Creative Incubator wouldn't exist without being a part of so-called creative ecology. We have pretty wide network in different stages. First of all, we have close contacts with Academy of Arts. Actually, mostly from this academy, the graduates come, and they don't have much choices in Estonia. They are not waited in companies to start work there. Mostly their choice is to become an entrepreneur or start working somewhere in other sector and not according to their professional skills. So incubator could be one choice for them. But we also have very good contacts with University of Technology, because we always think that our role is to encourage creative people to work together with engineers and to know about new technology trends. We do have contacts with development centers and craft unions. From there we get many knowledges, new trends, inputs to our actions. And in local stage we do great work in raising general awareness, for instance, and using marketing possibilities, for instance, with Tallinn Tourism Board. And we also try to convince local municipalities to order their business gifts from incubator companies, so for state officials. And we try to be on spotlight all the time. This is very important, to give the signal all the time that we are here and we are doing good work. Now I would like to show you a show reel. Can you please start it? It's in internet. Here it comes. And play. So Estonia is supposed to be very good in internet access, but I couldn't prove it to you. So, can you help out with this now? Thank you. I think that was a pretty good example how creative area is connected to other areas. So this showreel is made by creative animation studio called Tolm, and actually they are one of our success stories, and not only from economical side. By the way, they were awarded as the brightest and fastest starter of a year by Tallinn City Enterprise Board. But they are also awarded by their creative side. They have won some 80 awards. There are positive and negative sides at incubation. We are increasing the number of creative businesses. We are helping to create jobs, which is very important nowadays. We are doing it by decreasing their startup risks, by offering different resources like knowledges, incubator managers help, supporting in joint marketing. We're offering shared equipment and premises under market price. But there always a risk that some of those startup companies are kept alive like artificially. The risk that maybe they wouldn't exist without incubator, and maybe they wouldn't be sustainable in open market. Some of those startup companies get a bit wrong signal in the beginning that when their business plan is accepted and they are accepted in incubator, that automatically makes out of it a good entrepreneur. Actually, this is not true. But there is also a risk that this 2 years in incubator is not enough time to get sustainable. And why? Because becoming an entrepreneur, it needs a change of creative people's thinking. They are mostly great professionals, but lack of managerial skills and entrepreneurial thinking. But still we give this very positive sign to society that incubating creative companies has the same importance as incubating technology-based companies, IT companies, that this sector is also very important. It has growing importance and has connections with other sectors. So today we know very well in Creative Incubator how to bring good ideas into business plan. We have some experiences with success stories, but we need to meet our tenant companies' new expectations, like expanding and production development. The real problem is that Estonian home market is so tiny and there is not room for everyone. It certainly enables survival for young companies and maybe to do like lifestyle business, which is not bad at all. But to meet better the needs, we started together with Institute of Future Research, a research about creating micro-entrepreneurs to specialize their life cycle, their motivation, their real inner driving forces, their characteristics. It will help us better understand how to impact measures more effective way, how to make them cooperate more intensively. Because in this area there is always a problem of delegating and those things we are facing today. Now, after 2 years of settling support measures for CI, we are expected like instant result. We have been keeping about CI sector. We have had it in spotlight. We are having measures. Much of governmental money is put in, and society asks, where are the results? We are like thinking in sport terms that the instant visible benefit from action must be here, must be there. But the basic cultural values and processes are also having impact. And not all sides of CI sector is clearly measurable, is not clearly measurable from economical side. And this shouldn't make us the scapegoat. And I really think at the end that we should give some more time for creative people, and not all of them are not supposed to become entrepreneurs or successful businesses, but some of them could stay just like artists and lifestyle businesses to have just very nice and holistic society. And that would be all from my side. Thank you. If you have some further questions, please contact me. And you have possibility this afternoon to visit the Creative Incubator and maybe get cheaper with this topic then. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Going to come back. Thank you very much for that. I do recommend a visit to the incubator as well. I've been there before, and it's really interesting, and it's an interesting in the wider context in terms of the development that it's surrounded by. Thank you, Anna. There were some really excellent points at the end there, which I think actually help us to build a bridge into the next session and beyond, because I think some of those questions, are coming from a perspective, from your perspective in running the incubator, but actually they apply to Estonia as a whole, I think. And I think they also apply, hopefully, to some of you in other contexts, in terms of how you balance agendas, whether it's around economy or around creativity and excellence, the relationship between the social and value of creative activities and what they do in terms of providing jobs and driving the economy. I think it's a particular challenge, obviously, in Estonia, which has such a small market, and also has, because it's a small place, has relatively shallow labour pools when it comes to specialist skills, specialist knowledge, and activities around the creative economy. So it raises the challenge in terms of, what does growth mean? What does success look like for businesses that are coming out of your incubator, or into and then out of your incubator? I have one question, which is around how you lock in to other networks that perhaps are international. So you're incubating talent, you're supporting businesses to grow in Estonia. But how do you perhaps connect them to knowledge, to capacity, and to markets internationally? Because this is a theme that we're going to be discussing as well after the break.
Mm-hmm. I think one very good way is attending on fairs, attending some showrooms, attending meetings to attract other areas and maybe to attract some who would like to cooperate. And we help, like I told before, these creative companies to build up their portfolios, because I think being awarded in competitions and shows, it also gives a boost, somebody to get interested in them and to build up good teams.
Okay. Thank you. Has anybody got any questions for Anna? This one over here.
My name is Evi and I'm from Riga City Council. And during your presentation you mentioned the work with local municipalities. And I wonder, do local municipalities support incubator in some way? If yes, then how? And what would be the support a municipality could give to incubator in general? Thanks.
Mm-hmm. The Tallinn Creative Incubator has this advantage to be one of the focus financed institution by Tallinn City. Actually, Tallinn City cares a lot about creative startups, and we are basic financed by Tallinn City. But I think with the cooperation of city, we can keep the topic all the time in spotlight and doing some joint marketing also together with the tourism board.
Any more questions? No? Okay then, we're going to move on. I want to thank our two speakers. We're going to sort of shift into a different gear slightly now in a second with my colleague Ragnar Still. So I want to thank you for your contribution and give you a little gift, and then you're free to go. So there you go. Thank you very much. Some lovely Estonia chocolates. Thank you. Okay. So as we do a quick changeover, I just want to, I suppose, revisit this manifesto thing. And I want to ask my colleague Ragnar Sill to give his thoughts and perhaps some provocations around what he thinks the role of this document might be, or where it might take us. Because as I said earlier on, we're keen that this is a conference that delivers results into the future and that actually helps to shape debates in a more concrete way than perhaps other conferences that we've been to. Ragnar has got the longest job title of anybody here because he has his another English expression, has his fingers in lots of pies. So your main job is the Undersecretary for Fine Arts and Chair of the and then your secondary job of relevance to here, and you've probably got about a dozen other jobs, is that you're Chair of the EU Working Group on Cultural and Creative Industries. I'm just going to ask Ragnar to give some reflections and hopefully guide us in terms of what we can do with this as a resource, but what we can most critically, I think, do with all of you as a resource so that we can co-create an agenda that is much more progressive in terms of how we relate to the creative economy in the future. Ragnar, over to you.
Will you take the stage there?
I'll move backwards and forwards,
perfect. Yeah. Good morning or good day. I thought he asked me to reflect on my job title. So looking at the video that Anu showed, and Estonian tiger was sleepy this morning. And slow. It reminded me, 8 years ago I was in Minsk. And you know, during the Soviet times, Estonians were known as a slow people. All over in the Soviet Union, all the jokes were on how slow we are. Okay? So there I was with my friend, early morning, 8 o'clock, in probably the only open internet cafeteria in Minsk, downtown Minsk. So there we are, just me and my friend and one local guy. So we are all very quiet and we're on the computers. And you know, when you press the button somewhere, then the page started to load like this. You know, you imagine this very, very slowly. And this local guy, wanted to see a video, and something like this happened, like Anu showed, you know. And suddenly, out of nowhere, this guy lost his temper and shouted all over the room. And he didn't know that we are from Estonia. We were very quiet. So he shouted all over the room, like, "Oh, this bloody Estonian internet." So maybe it's not such a surprise after all that things do not run very quickly in this country. I'm not going to introduce myself in detail, the Tallinn Manifesto, but I'm going to give you maybe a slightly wider context of what's happening in Europe and why what we do here in Tallinn this week is so important. Now, you've been staying here in this conference hall for 3 days. Well, some of you all the time, some of you maybe less. But it's not only important what happens here in this room. There has been many important meetings happening on the sidelines as well. On Tuesday, Tallinn was hosting also a network of the Northern Dimension. So all the countries around the Baltic Sea, including Russia and Iceland and Norway, together with all the other European Union countries around the Baltic Sea, have signed 2 years ago a memorandum of understanding on developing together the potential of creative industries. We've set up a secretariat in Copenhagen, and this was an opportunity for us to meet again, to discuss what kind of measures we put in place for developing the creative industries in the region. I see some of my colleagues here still, and some of them already left. Now, today, there's another meeting, sideline meeting, on the next room. Maybe you saw 15, 16 people stepping in just minutes ago. And we are the European Union working group, or the expert group on creative industries, culture and creative industries. We've been given a mandate by the European countries to come up with a policy handbook by the end of this year. A policy handbook that should answer the question on how to better develop culture creative industries in the regions and in the cities, in the local municipalities in the European Union. And how to use or maximize the use of different European funds, including European structure funds, in that work. It's a heavy task. We try to do our best, but this work does not stop by the end of this year. We continue until 2013. And the next topics this expert group will go much more into details are internationalization strategy for the European creative industries, how to support the export potential, and secondly, how to facilitate the access to finance. We all know this is one of the most crucial issues, and already just before we got from this room to here, we were discussing how can we set up, how European countries can set up different funding mechanisms that take into account the special nature of creative and cultural industries. We were also having a very interesting discussion how, unlike usually, subsidy-like or grant-like, or even just, investment-like funding mechanisms, how can we introduce more of venture capital type of funding mechanisms? How can we put guarantee funding? And we know that from the next financial period from the European Union, this is going to be much more focused. So it's a very interesting time we are living. It's important to understand how we work. We basically, in our working group, have looked at the creative industries and the way we need to develop it on 3 levels. And we have, divided ourselves according to those lines. So the first thing we look into is the preconditions that are necessary to develop creative industries. Okay? So the question there is, what there should be in place in the region so we could start talking about, really using the maximum potential of the creative industries. What about mappings and statistics and strategies? I still have the very first speaker in my mind saying, forget about the mappings, forget about the strategies. He might be right. Maybe not. We will see about that. So what is this educational background that needs to be there so we can actually use the potential? Now, the second thing that we talk about is the sector itself. How to strengthen the culture and creative industry themselves. Okay? And the third, which is probably the reason why countries, the governments around the world, the first place are so interested in creative industries. I mean, if it would be only the creative businesses themselves, probably it's just too little of a niche, you know? It would never have such a political recognition if it would be just that, you know, just the 3% of GDP, or just the number of companies, or just the number of people. But the reason why governments around the world find it so attractive is the third layer of our work, and that's the spillover effects to the other industries, to innovation, to tourism, to manufacturing, etc., etc. So this is the work we've been doing since the beginning of this year. This is the work that we hope that Tallinn Manifesto feeds into very nicely, and probably when you went through the manifesto text already, you see how it very clearly has a connection to what we've been doing in the working group. Before I give the word over to Tom, first of all, I'd like to thank Tom. It has been fantastic to work with you. It's fantastic that you're all here in Tallinn. Tallinn is a culture capital of Europe, but much more. Tallinn is the heart of creative economy at this very moment. There is a small event happening in Brussels at the same time, a very small. But you know, this is much more important. So even the key people from Commission, you know, said enough is enough, and they traveled from that small event from Brussels to be with us today. So thank you, Sylvain. I think that, you know, we work, and my colleagues on the back rows, I see, you know, more than 20 of them. We have to work every day on a very different level. We have to convince policymakers, politicians, the governments, that they should invest into creative industries. The arguments we usually use in our everyday communication are very general. They are very superficial, and we try to make the point that culture counts, culture matters, and creative industries is something worth investing into. So for me, these last 3 days have been really a bit of enlightenment, and also just a breath of fresh air, because this has allowed me in the last 3 days to go into much more detail in how this sector really works, how these people really think, and what are the forces underneath that drive this sector. So this has been an enlightening experience for me as well. But over to you, Tom.
Well, thank you, Ragnar, as well, because I know that he talks about the stereotype of Estonian slowness, and maybe the Estonian tiger wasn't roaring on all cylinders earlier on today, but actually, in a relatively small country, you have to roar extra loud to actually get noticed and make things happen. And Ragnar's been working very hard around this broad agenda in the creative economy for a number of years, and is a key player at a European level, which is really, really credible, and big credit to you. I just want to give you this. Just introduce this little story, because we talk a lot about collaboration and international working, and the importance of plugging into networks and sharing knowledge and developing market relationships. But sometimes it doesn't work, and I think that's why perhaps sometimes we need to have common reference points and common ways of describing things, even if that means simplifying things, even if that means crudely abstracting things. So. A man in the UK orders some slippers in China, and they ignore the decimal point. Small detail with very big consequences. And I think this, for me, is as good a reason as any to have the Tallinn Manifesto, because this, for me, suggests we need common reference points that are clear, simple, and that we can relate to and refer to make our lives a little bit more simple. Perhaps less surprising and less fun, but certainly more simple. So the idea, I think, when I was asked to help to program this conference, was that we would develop something that not most conferences don't tend to do, which is an agenda that we can then work with and work toward in the future when we leave this wonderful city. So the Tallinn Manifesto, as it's currently called, might become just more broadly a creative economy manifesto, and you can sort of find and replace Tallinn with other cities or other regions. But I think more generally, it's about trying to recast this creative industries agenda, this creative economy agenda, in a light that responds, I suppose, to years of practice, that builds on the learning that we have, the credible knowledge that we have, but also responds to some of those more systemic big picture agendas, in terms of how we bounce out of the downturn, how we make the most of digital technology in terms of how it enables us to connect, in terms of the new business models it generates, how we more effectively build relationships between the arts and cultural sector and the commercializing creative industry sector, and how we engage with talent. It's really hard, and sometimes it's sort of disrespectful to sort of talk about talent as a raw material, as a commodity. But there's no easy way of describing it. But actually, all this is about talent. It's about people with ideas, people with aspirations, and we need obviously to put talent to the heart of anything we do to support the creative economy. And we need to be sensitive to nurturing that talent. We need to be sensitive to who we're engaging with, because as we said earlier on, the creative economy has been too exclusive. It's been for people who already have access to privileged knowledge, to privilege in different ways. And actually, that means we're underutilizing a resource, which is the full diversity of the talent that we have. And that's a critical agenda at a time of high unemployment, and a time where so much talent is under-realized. And if we want to use kind of commercial language, it's under-capitalized. So the Tallinn Manifesto is a little step, hopefully, in a direction where we can work together more effectively to have a more considered, more nuanced approach to the creative economy. And it's been developed from the outset in the spirit of co-creation and all those kind of codes that Andrew Erskine mentioned yesterday when we talked about leadership. So when I started to think about it, I thought, okay, well, I can't write this alone. I can start to write it alone, but I need some input from others. So I asked all of the speakers to, just email me a few points, a few ideas that, the driving forces for them, or the mobilizing kind of concepts for them in terms of where we need to take this agenda for the creative economy. So the version that you have in your packs is a version that is a combination of me writing it, but also other speakers already contributing ideas, concepts, different types of language. And then all throughout this conference, obviously, through your questions, the conversations we've had in the plenary, but also the informal conversations, through the blog, through the Twitter feed as well. My colleague Rosalind Benjamin, who's way at the back there, has been scribbling away, writing up notes throughout the whole conference, trying to pick up some themes and some strands that have coming through. So that is, in turn, going to be driven into the next version of the Tallinn Manifesto. But what I want to do now, in the next, how long we got? We've got about 10 minutes or so. It's just to whiz you through the themes, but I just want to have the themes standing there, and I want you to just comment on what you think might be missing, what you think perhaps is appropriate or inappropriate, and what perhaps we can do to make this document work more effectively. And then, of course, we can do that after the conference as well, in terms of you can all email, we can all blog about this. But I just want you to feed back directly to me, to us, so that we can make this document sounder and more useful. So openness is key. Oh, I should just say as well, because it's Rasmus yesterday who said that when he was talking about the Nordic Green Paper, that there are, however, was it 47 or 47,000 recommendations? I can't remember. There were too many recommendations, and it's therefore very hard to apply it. There are only 26 recommendations in the Tallinn Manifesto at the moment, and maybe there are too many, or maybe there aren't enough. But I think the way I see them is that they're prompts, really. They're not specific actions. They're not. It's not prescriptive. They're prompts for working, for intervention. So creative talent, the first of the 5 themes, and these themes may be wrong, and maybe we need more themes. I don't know. It's up to you. But creative talent, putting talent to the heart of the way we go forward in this. I've got. There are a series of different recommendations in this context, and obviously some of them probably you can see relate to the presentations that we've had this morning from Danny and Anu. But do these feel right? Any comments? Am I missing something here? Is there something that has to be here that's a burning issue in terms of creative talent development that needs to be in the next version of the manifesto?
I was just wondering that if we are going to be successful in in training people, then we have to start at a much, much earlier time than when people come out of school. And this is not reflected, I think, under your talent thing.
Great, thank you. And it will be. Any more observations around talent?
Thank you, Tom. I was going to talk later to give you the input as we described, but I thought I'd do it now because of the image. The image there of a lady, obviously, she could be from Europe, but she could, or the United States, but she could be from Africa. And I would like to appeal for the globalization factor that we need to consider from the Tallinn Manifesto. I come from the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. I've been very inspired by the talks yesterday, and particularly the vision of Andrew to at least look at the human aspects of this. And I think that's where we can start to argue about saying we should not only be measured in monetary terms. I'm a consultant for UNIDO, but I worked within the organization for 20 years, and I know what you mean, being measured only in monetary terms. That's the reason I left the organization, to do my own thing first, and then I came back in. So I'm very happy to be here with you, and I'm very happy to be able to say that I will go back to the United Nations to say that there was this conference which took a fresh look at what the creative industries and the cultural industries and the creative economy can contribute to the whole crisis that's going worldwide. In UNIDO, there is some kind of a reluctance to include the creative industries because of the fact that it has been associated with culture and artists and so forth. But they took me back in after 10 years of working with artists and creative industries. So I think that's a step back in that I'd like to associate with your work. I'd like to say, let's not just talk of exports. Let's talk of associating with the people in the South, and let's talk about North-South cooperation. In that sense, I'd like to talk about what we talked yesterday outside the conference. I am mandated at the moment to prepare and conceptualize a Green Awards for the creative industries from the United Nations, and which we are going to pilot in the Caribbean. But I would like to, I've talked to some of you outside because I thought I would not announce this. I'm not announcing this saying, this is going to be a formal association now. But the creative industries chair of Europe is here. So perhaps there is some kind of an informal association that we can start talking about. I am very, very inspired by the fact that some of you talked about regionalization, about rural industries, and about that I'm able to talk now then about green growth. If there are some of you who are interested to cooperate with us, be it in terms of the knowledge inputs, best practice, I prefer to say good practice, in linking up green creative industries towards the green concerns that we have, I'd like you to please get in touch with me. I would try to link you up to this program, and who knows, perhaps it might become a bigger program between the EU and UNIDO and the Tallinn Manifesto. So thank you very much.
Andrew.
Thank you. Thanks for the name check. 2 quick points, really. One is we heard very good presentations on universities' role today. Yesterday we had, in the kind of express session, we had a very interesting discussion about apprenticeship and engaging with young people that have no access to the university system. And I think there's a lot to be said for investigating the apprenticeship system and to get the sector to invest itself into apprenticeship systems so it's not all left to the state and all left to the universities. And just a very quick point that's picking up on that is that the same applies to the investment model, actually, and that in the green sector, I'm working with the Edinburgh Environmental Centre on Climate Change, and the Scottish Government. And we're developing investment models that will actually allow for green investment into sustainable energy, but it's actually connected to communities and things like green equity bonds and stuff like this. And I actually think we're creating new investment models for a new sector. And I think maybe we should try and join that together, because I think exploring new investment models for creative industries could follow a similar path to a degree.
Thank you, Andrew. What I'm going to do, I think Bernd, you're Bernd, aren't you? I thought you were. I recognise you from the photo. I've got a question. I just wanted to say, rather than go through, in a laboured way, going through every single one of these themes, let's just comment generally on the manifesto. You can, because this point cuts into another theme, and et cetera, and also what we don't achieve in this session, we've also got the next session, so we can have more debate and discussion there. So I don't want to hold you back, but also conscious that we'll need coffee to recharge ourselves for the next session. Bernd.
Thanks, Tom. I want to point out this this focus you have in your first theme. If you're trying to empower and to better formal education by inserting creativity elements, if you would try to do this in Germany, you would be debating with about 16 federal states for another 10 years before you have anything changed. So change towards creativity in Germany is being brought about by foundations, giving their non-profit money to do things parallel, but in coordination with the public education system. So I think maybe you think about this focus. It's not only about empowering formal systems, but also giving money for new systems, which might be much more informal. They are non-government, but in the sense of government aims. This, I think you need a more formal flexibility when you go for creativity education.
Mm-hmm. Good, really good point, yeah. Okay. Would anybody else like to jump into the discussion at this point? Or are we just hanging on for coffee? We're hanging on for coffee, aren't we? Okay. I really want to just thank Ragnar again. Ragnar, there's a box of chocolates for you over there. Estonian chocolates, very good. Have you ever tried it?
I need the second one, because I have a large group waiting in the second. How can I go with 7 of them? They will eat me up.
Okay. In the next session, after the break, if we make it sort of 20 minutes, we come back just about sort of 12:05. Okay. We've got Bernd Fessen, we've got Leo van Loon, and we're going to be talking about the future. We're going to be talking about what we do next. Okay. So, we'll hopefully leave this building, with a spring in our step and, an optimistic smile. Okay? See you soon. Well done, Ragnar. It was tricky, that, because we just didn't have any time, did we? To
Thinking of the fear I've had so long. When somebody hears, listen to the fear that's gone. Strangled by the wishes of Peter, hoping for the arms of Mater. Get to me the sooner of later. Holding back the years, chance for me to escape from all I've known. Holding back the tears, 'cause nothing here has grown. those years, and nothing had the chance to be good, and nothing ever could. Yeah, I'll keep holding on. I'll keep holding on. I'll keep holding on. I'll keep holding on so tight. Wasted all my tears, wasted all those years, and nothing had the chance to be good, 'cause nothing ever could. Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'll keep holding on. I'll keep holding on. I'll keep holding on. I'll keep holding on. Holding, holding, holding on. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's all I have today. It's all I have to say. All I have today. All I have to say. Sometimes I feel I've got you. Run away, I've got you. Get away from the pain you drive into the hurt of me. The love we share seems to go nowhere, and I've lost my light. For I just and turn, I can't sleep at night. Once I ran to you, now I run from you. This tainted love you've given, I give you all a boy could give you. Take my tears and that's not nearly all. Tainted love, tainted love. Now I know I've got you. Run away, I've got you. Get away. You don't really want any more from me. To make things right, you need someone to hold you tight. And you think love is to pray, but I'm sorry, I don't pray that way. Once I ran to you, now I run from you. This tainted love you've given, I give you all a boy could give you. Take my tears and that's not nearly all. Tainted love, tainted love. Don't touch me, please, I cannot stand the way you tease. I love you, though you hurt me so. Now I'm going to pack my things and go. tainted love you've given. I give you all a boy could give you. Take my tears, and that's not nearly all. Tainted love.
Talking away, I don't know what I'm to say. I'll say it anyway. Today's another day to find you shine away. I'll be coming for your love, okay? Take on me, take on me, take me in a day or two. Needless to say, I'm not synonyms, but me stumbling away, slowly learning life is okay. Say after me, it's no better to be safe than sorry. Take on me, take on me, take me in a day or two. Things that you say, is it live or just to play my worries away? You're all the things I've got to remember. You shine away. I'll be coming for you anyway. Take on me, take on me, take me in a day or two.
Some boys kiss me, some boys hug me. I think they're okay. If they don't give me proper credit, I just walk away. They can beg and they can plead, but can't see the light. 'Cause the boy with a cold hard cash is always Mr. Right. 'Cause we're living in a material world, and I am a material girl. You know that we're living in a material world, and I am a material girl. A material girl. Some buzz romance, some buzz slow dance. That's alright with me. If they can't rise my interest, then I have to let them be. Well, some boys try and some boys lie, but I don't let them play. The only boys who save their pennies make my rainy day. 'Cause we're living in a material world, and I am a material girl. You know that we're living in a material world, and I am a material girl. A material girl. Boys may come and boys may go, and that's alright, you see. Experience has made me rich, and now they're after me. 'Cause everybody's living in a material world, and I am a material girl. You know that we're living in a material world, and I am a material girl. A material girl.
Every breath you take, every move you make, every bound you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you. Every single day, every word you say, every game you play, every night you stay, I'll be watching you. Oh, can you see you belong to me? How my poor heart aches with every step you take, every move you make, every bow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I've been watching you. Since you've gone, I've been lost without a trace. I dream at night, I can only see your face. I look around, but it's you I can't replace. I feel so cold and I long for your embrace. I keep crying, baby, baby, please.
was a sound. I bought a ticket to the world, but now I've come back again. Why do I find it hard to write and explain? Oh, I wanted truth to be said. And know this match is true. And know this match is true. Where the frail of my hand and the bill of my tongue, deaths of the nerves that have just begun. Listen to Marvin all night long. This is the sound of my soul. This is the sound always slipping from my hands. Set a time of its own. Take your scissored arms and write an slang. But I wanted truth to be known. And know this much is true. And know this much is true. I bought a ticket to the world, but now I've come back again. Why do I find it hard to write an slang? Oh, I wanted truth to be said. I know this much is true. And know this much is true. I used to think maybe you love me, now baby I'm sure. And I just can't wait till the day when you knock on my door. Now every time I go to the neighbors, gotta hold myself down. Yeah, 'cause I just can't wait till you ride me, you're coming around. I'm walking in sunshine. Oh, I'm walking in sunshine. Oh, I'm walking in sunshine. Oh, and don't it feel good? Hey, don't it feel good? I used to think maybe you love me, now I know that it's true. And I don't want to spend my life just in waiting for you. Now I don't want you back for the weekend, not back for a day. No, no, no. I said, baby, I just want you back, and I want you to stay. I'm walking in sunshine.
like a beauty queen from a movie scene. I said, oh my, but what do you mean? I am the one who we dance on the floor in a round. She said, I am the one who we dance on the floor in a round. She told me her name was Billie Jean as she crossed the scene. Then every hair turned red eyes, a dream of being the one who we dance on the floor in a round.
People always told me, be careful what you do. Don't go around breaking young girls' hearts. A mother always told me, be careful what you love. Be careful what you do, cause a life becomes a truth. Billie Jean is not my love. She's just a girl who claims that I am the one. But the kid is not my son.
Oh. How you doing then? You all right? How are you? How are you doing? How are things?
Yeah, good.
It's good that.
It's a bit busy, but that goes with the season, no?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the. Yeah, I'll do an introduction and then get your job title right. That's it. That's very easy. Yeah. They'll tell me when we're ready. Yeah, are we ready? We're ready. Okay, now you guys really are the brave, stalwart, stamina people now. So, because every time I look up, there's slightly less people here, but credit to you. Okay, this is the final session, and I hope you're not pleased to hear that, because of course, it'd be nice to continue talking, and hopefully we will after the conference as well. And of course, there's a tour. There's a visit to the Tallinn incubator that some of you are going to go on, so which I do recommend as well. Sorry, it's okay. This session is about the future. It's about reflecting on the past, but it's about looking to the future and thinking about what we can do in the future to position the creative economy as something that is much more meaningful, much more applied, much more sensible, and hopefully something that cuts out some of the things that are frustrating around creative economy strategies and approaches to the creative industries. We've heard a lot about how the creativity or creative industries is sometimes overused or is positioned inappropriately in terms of strategic development. We need to find a new language. We need to find a structured approach to supporting the creative economy at the heart of a wider economy. So in that context, I've asked our next two speakers to be optimistic, to be constructive, but also, as I've asked all of our speakers, to be critical, to think and act critically in terms of what we've done and how we can improve upon what we've done. So, without further ado, I'm really pleased that Bernd Fessel has joined us from Germany. He's the CEO of the European Centre for Creative Economy, and he's going to talk about the future. So please, over to you, Bernd.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Well, Tom didn't only ask me to talk about the future, but always kind of introduced to me the most difficult speech I ever made. Talk about the future. We all don't know anything about the future, to be frank. I mean, it's totally volatile. It's almost lunch break, and he said, I have to talk 45 minutes. And I hope this will not be the case. Please ask questions. Let us have a small dialogue and interrupt me if you're getting lost, because going in the future obviously means going and covering new ground. So when he asked me to speak about creative industries in future, I first of all had some questions to myself, because that's not a daily topic, as you can imagine. And so I thought the best way to cover this new ground is really sharing those questions with you, sharing my answers, proposals, and then tell you a little lessons I learned from this, hoping this will lead us to those new languages you have here. And then I will introduce some of the strategies we do at the ECCE Center in Dortmund. Now, before you all get lost by all the many words I will do, this is the thing I'm talking about. It is just my whole presentation in one slide, but I thought it's more fun when we talk it through. But maybe keep this in mind when we progress. You will see the matters later on. Well, the questions. One is talking about creativity. What does it mean as a good? Second thing is what is happening today? And then future, what is future? Or better, what is our concept of future? What was future some 20 years ago? We had a different perception of this. What perception do we have of the future? We see it today. Those three things will lead us to, I think, some new perspective, also working basically on the ground with new strategies. Well, creativity is something different, totally different than an industrial good. It's not repetitive, it's not a serious production, and the costs of creativity are not sinking the more you do. That's the traditional way industrial goods work. So you have to keep in mind the costs of producing creativity are staying high. That's quite important when you're talking to an economic department. It's not decreasing costs. And the economic theory phrases those products, those immaterial products, trust goods. If you go in a film, you don't know what you get, so you have to trust in the quality. If you buy a car, you know what you get and you can experience it. So that's a great difference, and this is something you have been talking here earlier before, that it's so difficult to transform the immaterial to the material. Well, that's not your fault. It cannot be done, because it's a different good. And as you see now, talking about currencies and banks, you see more and more the word, it's about trust. And that's the reason why many of the goods we use in daily life are in fact trust goods. But they have been used for many other reasons otherwise. And so you come back to creativity being a different good than industrial good. For this reason, it's permanently fragmented. So you have high costs of information. You have been talking about this here also, the incubator thing, how to reach networks. This is not a fault. You cannot decrease costs of information with creativity. It will stay fragmented. So creative economy has other rules than industrial markets, leading to innovation markets with no economies of scale. So this means markets for innovation are not necessarily really good earning markets. This is something different. Demand for creativity, and that's most interesting, the research says there are two ways to increase demand for creativity. The one is the copy effect and the other one is the snob effect. The copy effect you all know, it's Facebook. I like it, I do it the same. This works perfectly. And the other effect is that you disagree, and not only disagree, that you say, I do it better. I open my own Facebook. You are the snob going the other way from the trend. The research says those are the two easy things how you stir demand for creative products, either this way or that way. So if you think this through, the great snob website besides Facebook, it is still missing. What is happening today? Well, I wouldn't never dare to answer this question on my own. So I looked for some help, and Jeremy Rifkin just toured Germany publishing his book, having this thesis about the third industrial revolution, and I think it's really appealing. Of course, this is only one explanation, but I think it's one which gives a wider framework to the creative industries, which really incorporates a lot of changes. And of course, looking to Germany, it feels like home, because we just had this great change in energy markets, which Jeremy Rifkin is talking about. His thesis is the next industrial revolution is coming about by the combination of new energy systems and the communication technology. It will result not in new monopolies for energy or for car production, but in distributed regimes of production. His vision is that each home is a small energy production center, to say it just in a short phrase. But it coincides with the phenomenon of the internet, which is, because of the digital distribution, by kind of, eliminating all monopolies, at least in the cultural field. Look into the majors of the music industry. look into the majors of the film industry. And the book fair just took place in Germany, the international market to talk about literature future last week. And all we were debating about is what will happen to the large editors and their monopolies in the future. So Rifkin's thesis that you have a distributed regime of production, I think it's true. You will see new products in many markets because there are no barriers to entry. Everybody here could be a producer, and it's so cheap to be this. So the world of the producer, of the prosumer, or the app world, it's fascinating, but of course it's also a danger because you are never sure of your market. You never know who is entering the market. You have to be in a constant move. So markets are more risky. And not just because you missed something, but because the entry in the market is so cheap. Talking of policymakers, one could really question if it's good for the wealth of an economy if market entry is so cheap. Yeah. Now, last topic of Rifkin is you will get new markets. And just one example, which is quite obviously, we will get more and more transportation. We want to be more global. We want to be more networked. And we all know digital networks needs first personal networks. And so in order to get more transportation, you won't get more cars, but you will have a market for mobility. You will have services for mobility. And the next interesting question will be if those providers of service mobility markets will be BMW, Mercedes, Chrysler, or if there will be totally new companies. If next time your iPhone is your mobility service, then you will see a new company for services there. Rifkin produced this sentence, which I think is important for our framework, asking how Rifkin's thesis is coming down to the creative industries. And this really relates to the creative industries being also a young industry and being an industry driven by young people. For a younger generation that's growing up in a less hierarchical and more networked world, the ability to produce and share their own energy, like they produce and share their own information in an open access intergrid, will seem both natural and commonplace. And he didn't add in commonplace in the future. Of course it is not today. I think you will have here a kind of a culture clash between different understandings of economy, of the top-down monopoly and the bottom-up small. Now, given those two aspects, creativity as a concept of trust goods, economy going into smaller units, being bottom-up, being more risky though. So what is our concept of the future? If you look back in economic terms, we saw our future some 30 years ago as a linear progress to a perfect market. When I studied economics, we only talked about market equilibrium. I can recall when I made my thesis on market disequilibrium, my teacher was so mad at me. Thought, well, that's not a question at all. You don't have to research this. Today, we see the disadvantages of our low theory base because now we are in a situation of disequilibrium. And this concept of the former future, it implied that you knew the actors, that you knew who is moving in this market. You had what you called perfect foresight. Economy was in this vision really a happy-go-lucky world. The question is this vision of our future as a controllable, perfect foresight future, is this a good vision? Is this a realistic vision? And you have to keep in mind, you know, we only realize and notice and recognize what we want to see. So maybe we should refine our concept of future before we really talk about future. And the other version of future is the second one I put there, and it's not a less optimistic vision, don't misunderstand that. It's about incomplete information. It's a non-linear process. It's a market, and that's the theory term, of imperfect rationalities. It has no perfect foresight. It has hidden action, what we call hidden innovation. It has hidden actors. And in fact, most of us are in this situation of no foresight. We are all Google users. If you type in there and want to know what is happening in the world, you get a filtered view of reality, which is just given for you by your preferences. Of course, there are still people who have the perfect foresight. They know what you will get after you're typing your question. Those are the programmers of Google. So they are designing our world, our way of perception of this world. And one of our future questions is, where do you stand? Are you working in this field of no foresight, or do you have less foresight, perfect foresight? It's important to know where you want to be with your business and what your information horizon is. In this field today, with the creative industries, we always say collaboration, networking. Now, I think this trend in the creative industries is a meta trend to society. One of the reasons creative industries is really so recognized by policy and in society is not just, as Ragnar said, because of its economic value. It's because of its other immaterial value to society. And now you can say it's an innovation leader. But if you look into chemistry or into mobility, and if you look into other technologies, you find a lot of innovation there too. And if you talk to those people, they say, we are innovation leader too. I think creative industries is basically, for its bottom-up and collaboration trend, an avant-garde for society. And of course, creative industries and cultural actors didn't vote to be this. I think a lot of artists would love to be a large company and would have to have a worldwide monopoly for selling art. But it cannot be done. Their market, their trust goods, don't have those decreasing effects of costs. And without decreasing effects of costs, you never have a monopoly. You never have it. So for this reason, collaboration is the way of economic production line in the creative industries. And since the rest of the economy is now more and more becoming smaller, disintegrated, with less foresight, it's kind of moving to the character of the creative industries. The banking sector is much more organized like the creative industries today than it was 10 years ago. Of course, that's nothing they would like to hear, but the structural sameness is coming closer and closer. Now, a little attempt to learn from those questions and those answers. I divided this into sections, learnings maybe for a single entrepreneur, because it's about what can you do on the ground in your daily work. And the second is really what is the lessons to be learned for policymakers. Now, I have almost been talking 20 minutes in a row. Do you have any questions? Anybody asleep? Please raise his hand. Okay, then I continue. The next chapter now is on those lessons. This is another method to memorize all the lessons I will be talking about. For the entrepreneurs. Infrastructure of the future, how does it work? The more you repeat collaborations with partners, the more success you have. Out of all those things I've been talking about, this is a single important lessons to learn. If you're an entrepreneur and are working with people where you know that you will not be working with them next year, as a coach I would say, leave it. Don't leave it today, leave it yesterday. Don't work together with people you don't have a long-term perspective. You cannot enforce your earnings, you cannot enforce your prices, you cannot enlarge your share of the market. In the economy, and Rifkin and others are describing with those trust goods, it's about long-term partnership with collaboration. And this, in fact, makes it also so difficult to set up export. Usually, if you have an export scheme, you go somewhere once to a fair or to a music week, and then you don't do it again. But only if you are coming in the creative industries to a continuous export scheme, meeting the same market actors abroad, you will have a chance to have more and more success from time to time. So I really feel that permanent collaboration is something like the oil field of our future markets. And I specifically said here, future markets. It's not only for creative industries. It will be the same thing for a car mobility market. a services company providing mobility needs stable partners all over the world. And this is something difficult to build. I think that's one of the reasons why the electric car has not been able to be built so far, because the infrastructure of collaboration partners to get energy for my car from Germany and Italy or Spain or where else has not been built. Now, this is a graphic showing you what I've been talking about. Rifkin and this model of the trust economy says you need open access in order to work bottom up. You need repeated collaboration. And if you're in one of those other sectors where you have only one-time action or no open access, it's difficult to go into this third industrial revolution. And for this reason, I think it's no accident if you look into the investment scheme the European Union is just now announcing. It is into infrastructures of open access, in transportation and in broadband. Those investments also on city level will be necessary and can only be done, I think, by the public sphere. You had this in UK already some years ago. And so I think UK is one of the countries really set for this next industrial revolution. In Germany, for example, it would never be possible to have a free Wi-Fi like in this hotel. Usually pay 20 euros to go online. The next trend is the strong prosumer. What does it mean for you as an entrepreneur? You know, this mobile phone effect. One having a mobile phone, use it more and more to change your surrounding. You use it for music, you use it for other services. Probably you will do your interior design with your mobile phone in the future. So this prosumer, what does it really mean when you have a market? And I try to give some hints, just to give you an idea where to think about and to go into. This is not based on research, but on my experience in a lot of branches in Europe. Obviously, what is our iPhone and mobile phone or mobile computer now in terms of reforming the energy and transportation market is your home, your house. Housing and home will be changed substantially in the future, providing a lot of other services, and a lot of creative services can be used and be applied to this new rebuilt housing types. Of course, that's something which might take him 5 or 10 years, but the large companies are already researching it. And if you think about where do you position yourself now to be in a market hype in 5 years, I would say look into this. There's an experience by a interdisciplinary, cross-sectoral company joint venture called Universal Home at Zollverein. This former industrial coal mine, the largest in the world. Universal Home is done by interior design as well as the energy companies and a lot of other companies, almost 30, engaging into the question, how do we design this new, what they call universal home? And I think it's a lab for those future markets around this old-fashioned thing like feeling at home. And I think that will be a necessity in the future. However digital we are, we still need this. So this is really a home base of business in the second sense. Now it's about mobility or immobility. We all know when you want to travel, basically, you know that most of the time you travel, you know, you are in a traffic jam. So in fact, traveling today means immobility. And this is a solution which will come about by process designers. So designers will be there really asked. In the terms of sports and health, there will be a lot of changes because our society in general is getting older. So healthcare and sports will be a new overall topic, economic topic, but also a topic of the capability of the society to really, you know, not die at the costs of health. So this will be a huge, large sector, and I think gaming will be one of the sectors of the creative industries which will help to cope with all this, because you need so much knowledge in order to stay healthy or to move, to do all the sports you have to do. It's no chance you're going to learn this. You need a method to transform this knowledge to you as a point of use. And games, serious games, I think, is one of the future technologies doing this. So school is the next topic I think we have been talking here about already. And the last one is social entrepreneurship. I think one of the next part of this third revolution is obviously redesigning social communication, and you don't have to look to the riots in London or to the burning cars in Berlin or the banlieues in Paris to argue this. There are a lot of other more daily arguments for this, and one of this I just talked about with somebody here from Tallinn also. Just look into the migration culture in our societies. It is almost not visible. And of course, the way you dress, you signal where you belong to, in what kind of minority, in mainstream or not. Dressing is signaling and talking about your identity. In the Ruhr, where we had the culture capital, we have 100 migration nations living there. We have cities with 35% non-German or migrant culture, and this has not been addressed by policy. And of course, only when there will be no next economic upgrade and revolution without taking this large part of society into the economic shift. You cannot leave 30% of the society out. You will have not a chance for large economic growth. So there is a large need, and people pay for this. We have in the Ruhr, some fashion designers came up in one of those really run-down areas from a former coal mine called Duisburg-Marxloh. They set up a few fashion design studios, then stores. Today, most Turkish people who want to buy a dress to marry come from all over Europe to this one street. It's really a fashion capital for marriage dresses all over Europe. Now, what are the learnings for policymakers? I know this is maybe the most risky thing to talk about, but Ragnar kind of motivated me again to do this. Now, the first little lesson is on timeline. You have to see different perspectives. What you have to do as a politician really differs on the way when you want to do it. So short term, and this is already running, I would say, you have to prevent a digital divide, include the whole society. It's about more broadband. I think it's about more innovation will take place at home. It's about open innovation. It's about different working schemes. All this is happening already with the large companies. Today, if you look like a working organization like Google, and even the car companies are coming up with this. The third short-term topic is about transportation without cars. Now, the midterm things is more interesting, I believe, especially looking for policy designers, is how does all those trends, digital shift, the social migration topic, and the transportation topic interrelate together to building a new city. Of course, city design, city planning is an old topic. We all know Florida and we all know Charles Landry, but I think there will be a new debate for urbanism steered by those large economic forces. Those economic forces have not been in power when Florida and Landry started researching. They researched other cities. So for the next phase of city planning and designing urbanism, one have to look at those new cities developing. And to my surprise, really upfront was Picnic, the festival this year, who took as their new topic urban design for the next 5 years. And as you might have seen, they started this in an empty space at a pier, at a wharf. Yeah, there were no buildings. We were all working in tents. Now. And the last topic I already touched, midterm, is quite important for policymakers to design the personal data security and how you can engage with personal data in the internet. This is so vital because with all those personal data, whole economies, the digital economies are working. So if you don't make the next step beyond the copyright law to talk about how can you design your different personalities on Facebook and all your other networks, if you don't give control back to your data, it will be awful difficult to develop digital economies. The next Facebook generation, you can see a lot of debate if you're interested in this on the website TED.com, almost a weekly speech out of this field of researchers in Los Angeles and so forth is coming from there. Second lesson is maybe a little bit traditional, but I think nonetheless quite important. You have to make a difference in policy design for old markets and new markets. And you can see I'm here talking now to cultural politicians making design for economic markets. My experience with a lot of economic departments is they are not designed for the new economic markets. They're talking about other economic markets, the old ones. So don't be afraid as a cultural policy to talk about how you do design economic markets, because culture is already making economy, and it's not the economy the traditional departments or ministries of business mean. Well, the old markets in Europe are, as we all know, they're segregated, they're old markets, they're slow markets, they have high individualism. The policy focus, I think, here needs to be on integrated services. That's a complex, difficult thing. It's about combining different sectors. And the only way I believe you can do this is really by, in fact, bringing together those different disciplines at a very, very early stage. We have been talking here about incubators a lot. I think those incubators need to be much more intersectorial. We heard from the St. Martins those examples, and I think this is a right way and encouraging, but one can go steps further to be much more intersectorial and to have interdisciplinary innovation centers in Europe. There are already structures of innovation centers, the EBN, for example. They have over 180 innovation centers in Europe. This has been funded some 10 years ago by the European Union. Today you could refund this and turn this out of this sector research into an intersectorial, more open access model. Second, I believe that the European Union now needs to be opened more for those non-industrial goods, for those immaterial goods, for those trust goods. And when you will hear the presentation of Leo later on ECBN, you will find some hints how you can really start bringing people together who exchange on a European base immaterial goods. Well, the new markets might be for our economic growth the most important. That's the reason why it's last. So please wake up again. Who is sleeping? Please hail his hand. Very good. Thank you. Well, the new markets have high growth. You know this. They're open markets. They're less segregated markets. I believe policy focus must be here in those market sectors, not interdisciplinary. That's kind of a contradiction to the internal markets, but those are quite different. And you need, for this reason, I would promote something like creativity vouchers for creative industries in other countries. We now have a scheme for voucher system for creative industries within Europe. I think we need to export this and make this outside Europe just as well, to give design companies a chance to apply their knowledge outside in other foreign markets. This is a quite practical, easy to handle thing, and I hope this will go into the debate. Now, I just want to give you at the very last the closest picture. What are we doing in all this large field, which I designed now, as Tom asked me for? And when we started with the European Center for Creative Economy, of course, we were not aware of Rifkin, of any third industrial revolution. We just started to work with Landry. Those ideas came up 2008. when we were a small team within the culture capital, the smallest team with the smallest budget, and as it usually is for creative people, we started in the cellar behind the copy room. It was not really a garage, but it was almost like it. Now, what came out of it? We are now based, we are based in this building, which is vanishing again. I will show you it later on. It's now renovated. It's a brewery which fell empty some 15 years ago. When we started the Culture Capital with the idea to promote creative industries, we always said this cannot be done in 1 year. We can only build something like starting ramps. Of course, we made large events like the European Film Awards, but we use this to implement processes in the region which will continue after 2010. And those implemented processes are really what is now sustainable. Sometimes they're even working without us, without being funded by us or even moderated by us, and led to the foundation of our center. It took almost a year of transformation from those ideas and the first policy proclamations, yes, we want a sustainable structure, to the legal binding votes to do so. So here you see the four strategies we have: networking, promoting local spaces and make them usable for artists; consolidation, that means having large events with an international reach; and communication. Well, the branch promotion we do by a networking system where we ask people from those 50 cities we are working for as a regional body to design a regional strategy. And if this strategy is found, which almost needs a year or 1.5, we help them to fund it or to organize it. All those people working there are not being paid, so we ensure that we don't have free riders going into those processes just at the end to have some kind of process and product being funded. So we carefully design the makers in those commissions. And with the Music Commission and the Games Commission, it worked quite perfect. They now have their own funding, separate from our funding, and are continuing on their own now for another 5 years. They even set up a design center. Localization means really bringing up empty spaces in the Ruhr region for creatives. We have tens of thousands of square meters of empty space, which are being not rented to the creative industries. We asked ourselves why, and it was about the mindset of the people living there. And we said, we don't need any funding for the real estate owner, we don't need any funding for the artist, but we have to set up a round table where people who usually never talk to each other, the large real estate owner and the artist, discover that they need each other, that they are a market, and can then work together and open their spaces and rent it. We start supporting this with money when those groups of artists and real estate owners have a vision where they want to be in 5 years. And then we support projects which pay into this vision. Of course, there are a lot of other artistic projects which don't have a long-term strategic effect, but all cultural impulses with a long-term urban effect we promote with the last 5 or 10% of the money needed. We don't give a full funding. Now, this is the most interesting structure we created, in which is a guideline for all we do. And you find this again in the ideas of Rifkin and, of course, of other researchers, bringing together those structures which are needed for progress or innovation, but usually are segregated. Especially within public administrations, you have a lot of segregation of those competences, and we brought together in this informal round table. Nobody was really forced to go there. They could only be motivated to go there on their own. The economic department, cultural department, city planning department. City planning department works on a horizon of 10 years. Economic department, 2 to 5 years. Cultural department is asking, what do I fund in the next 6 months? Real estate owners still have a different scope. You can see bringing those things together, bringing them to a common strategy is quite difficult. But this is the basis of the continuation and sustainability we are now asked and funded for to do, to design such roundtables not only for the real estate owners but also for many other situations. I just give you an overview, just a vision. This is a former coal mine outside of a large city. This is the building we are in now, which used to be a brewery within the larger city of the Ruhr region, Dortmund. So this is central of the city. It's a public investment, something completely different than the private investment in this case here. That's all private owned. And last topic is we also have areas like this, which are totally disrupted, where you have over 30 real estate owners. This is again a totally different process of roundtable and process. But all those different situations you can use. Now this is the last strategy we engage on, communication. It's quite easy to see that creative industries and this topic of innovation have not enough media attention. If print or television, at least in Germany and France and the Netherlands, we see that those new upcoming economies have not enough media coverage. They don't have enough media coverage to really have a spin-off into the public debate and also in the change of policy. A lot of policymakers see that they engage for creative industries but don't get public attention. And this is really an obstacle to motivate policymakers to invest into creative industries. Policy lives from public attention. And if they don't get public attention for what they do in the field of creative industries, there will be no large future for public policy in the creative industries. So we took up this topic and designed an internet where I want to invite you to participate. It's a decentralized system where we have foreign correspondents currently at 6 cities, reaching from Rotterdam to Istanbul, from Barcelona to Tallinn. We have a film team especially for this here, but we also report on conferences like Picnic or Forum Avignon, or the online media partner for this topic for the book fair in Germany. This is a small overview, but you can see this later on the web. Now, the question is also, what can you do as a European Center for Europe? And of course, this is a topic we developed together with others. We have a European Council where we have been working intensively with in the last 2 or 3 years. And those are the 4 topics we do. The last one is the most easiest one. We have a summit where we meet to discuss policy topics in Brussels. The top one is the most challenging one, to set up an academy to give a policy award for creative industries. This pays into the public media idea that we need to more highlight the things happening on the ground. We don't know enough about the real progress taking place in those 27 nations we have. And for this reason, mainstreaming those things needs systems of public attention. And awards like the European Architecture Award or the Film Award are really working. They are being then brought in 40 channels in 40 nations on public television. So this is our vision, to set up an Academy for Creative Industry Policy Award, to have this mainstreamed into media as well. And of course, to have then the subsequent spin-off effect by people taking up those examples from their own, without being funded, by getting spin-off from this knowledge. Well, those are the 3 topics and the visions I had, and I hope I could take you from the very large picture, a la theory, the trust codes and Rifkin, down to what you can do in your daily work. If you go back to collaboration and open access, and you will find those strategies back here also in those 4 initiatives we, as a European Center, will start next year. And I hope we meet again then. Yes.
Thank you so much. That was really excellent. I love really good the way you blended the kind of the conceptual, the strategic, the practical in such a way. And also, I think you provided one of the quotes of the conference there with when you said, "Permanent collaboration in diversity is the oil field of future markets."
Yeah.
I like that. In so many levels. I'm sure some of you will have questions for Ben. I've just got one question, which is, to some extent, it's the heart of the matter for this conference, because you in your work, as European Centre for the Creative Economy, what you're basically doing is waving the flag for the creative economy, on the one hand, but also you're talking about the need for mainstreaming, for collaboration with other sectors, for integration, for therefore not for separating creativity or the creative industries from the rest of the economy. And it's very hard, I would imagine, to do those two things at the same time. So I just wondered if you could just perhaps reflect on that.
Well, you know, waving the flag is really part of making those matches with other sectors. If you see how many print magazines you have on the car industry or on the banking industry, if you look what kind of public attention and media is for all those other sectors, and if you look at a newspaper and just see on a national base just 2 or 3 articles on cultural events for the whole of Germany, you know, there's a large disbalance. There's no balance in this. And of course, it's difficult for somebody from the traditional industry to cooperate with the creative industries if it's so invisible. So I think more visibility is one of the first keys. And of course, then you have to provide really personal options to meet. And we do matchmakings between students and the traditional industries. We just had one yesterday. And of course, I don't have to tell you, you know this. Motivating the students was easy. Motivating the companies was really, really difficult. And to be frank, we showed them some videos of companies from the creative industries. And we really convinced them on a personal base. You had to call them and say, you know, we are no crazy guys, just give us one shot. And if you're not motivated after this, we will never ask you again. And my experience always was, if you get this one chance and one shot, you know, the virus, it's like a virus is planted. People are then curious and they will come again. And this is what I kind of said at the beginning also about personal networks. It is networking on a personal base. And for this reason, it's understandable that we have a lot of conferences for creative industries. We all need to meet. Yeah.
Thank you. Good point. And would anybody like to ask Bernd a question or to reflect, to comment?
Or please to disagree. I mean, this cannot all be agreeable, what I said here.
Come on now. This is no time for shyness.
I will not eat anybody. Yeah, please.
I'm the one that asks questions when nobody else does. Your comments on partnership and collaboration have carried through the whole conference, really. And it just strikes me that we still don't see partnership and collaboration as a discipline in itself. So we still kind of land on this, we still have this thing that it just happens, or people are good at it, or they're not good at it, or whatever. And actually it seems to me it's so central now that we need to treat it as a discipline in itself maybe, and think about training and development and education around it.
Well, there are theories on collaboration, how this works. And part of the trust good theory I introduced here is stemming out of this theory called game theory. And this designs how collaboration works. There are certain situations under which collaboration will never lead to a good result. And there are other coordinations and situations and factors where the probabilities of collaborations rise. In policy terms, you always see that collaborations, if they really have to work, they start making those midnight sessions, talking and making sessions until everybody is so tired that they agree. And of course, that's a rationale behind this, to say there is a canyon where you will walk into and fall into, and we now say we all keep on walking. And if you don't agree before you fall, you fall. And this is the method of anxiety. It's not a positive motivation. And of course, there are positive motivations to cooperate. And I really agree. I believe it would be really good for all the architects, designers, all students in the creative and cultural field to learn more about collaboration theory, to understand in what kinds of setups they are in. mostly you don't really see what you're in. Yeah.
That's a very good point. Anybody else before we? No? Okay.
Maybe I then
you gave them
just
all of the,
add one thing, because just to let you know, this this round table we designed, we talked this through with those theorists, and they said make it a non-obligatory session. If you oblige somebody to be in there, he can play the destructive role and say, I don't say anything and you don't get my vote, and if you need unanimity, he's just sitting there and blocking everything. If it's on a voluntary base and he can leave, then the person who is destructive leaves and only the so-called coalition of the willing is staying. And so this is a phrase which has a theoretical concept behind it. Yeah.
Dick.
Hi, I'm Dick Penny from Watershed in Bristol. I was really taken with your description of the market that we're moving into. I particularly liked your notion that the creative industries are permanently fragmented. That's the nature of it. So you've just talked a lot about collaboration, which I fundamentally believe in. And practice most of the time, not all of the time. When I get cross, I cease to be collaborative. The rest of the time, I'm fairly collaborative. But do you really think that governments that are so used to very structured hierarchies, indeed hierarchies that they have constructed and seek to maintain, do you really think that governments can actually enter into collaboration, which is open, which is fragmented, which does require listening? Do you really think that we can convince government that collaboration is something in which they have to collaborate, not that they, as you just said, oblige people to do?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's a yes and no. There are situations where you can motivate governments to collaborate on their own. But basically, governments, hierarchical systems in general, not only governments, start collaborating when there is no other way out. This is the reason why those night sessions are taking place. This is no other way out. They're always playing this game of no other way out. And for a next industrial revolution, which is also driven by government, government needs to change. It's about policy reform. And for me, one of the interesting messages, which is not really heard enough by Richard Florida, is not only the TTT, but he's always saying it's about reform of public administration. And of course, public administration always likes the three TTTs, and then forget about the reform of their own. And the cultural capital in the Ruhr region was a motor for reform of public administration. I work as a freelance still now, and I'm very skeptical of governments bringing about change. But the cultural capital really came about to be a perfect impulse for governmental change. Because now suddenly everybody was looking, what are you doing? Public attention, and there you come back to the visibility. What was the point? And one of the most interesting things after a culture capital is if you can go back from this reform into your old administrational modus, then you are lost.
On that note, let's collaborate.
Yes, please.
That's the title of Leo's presentation. I suppose it's, if you could sort of, if there's somebody sitting there counting the frequency of words used in this conference, collaborate must be up there with, almost up there with creativity. I'm not sure which of those C words is winning. Leo, the floor is yours. Leo van Loon is the managing director of the Rotterdam Creative Factory, and also he's going to talk to us about how we can perhaps collaborate more with an example of the European Creative Business Network. So over to you, Leo.
Thanks a lot, Tom, for this. And first I have to say that it's an honor for me to be able to close this conference after 3 days. And it's also a big pleasure to sit in this chair and see you all. So I would actually like to invite the photographer to take my seat and make a picture of you all, because you are the diehards here. So please go over. I see you make a lot of pictures of everybody on stage, but I think, to have a picture of you, I'll put it up over my bed, I promise. And, look at it every day. And I think this is great because you know, you hear a lot of stories from great speakers, and I hope I can do a good speech as well to close this conference. So everybody smile, please. Thank you. Okay, let's collaborate. That's the title. Please allow me to introduce myself and tell a little bit about why I think I'm on this stage. All the windows you see over there is the Creative Factory, old brick grain silo. The city of Rotterdam invested 5 million euros in the reconstruction, but it didn't invest a single euro in my company. I co-founded it. I'm the owner of the Creative Factory. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Here you see a lot of youngsters. At this moment, they're out of a job. They're not in school. Most people call them dropouts. Here you see them with their certificate, and we help them get out of welfare. As a trigger, you know, start your own business. Start up, make your dream reality. And some of them, they can make it as a full-time entrepreneur in the first step, so they go into work or they go into school. But over 800 youngsters have participated already in our programs. So that's something I really love. You know, you have these people and they have a dream. And I tell you, last night I heard a dream from a girl, and she's saying, you know, about her company. And the moment you speak this out, it's very fragile. It's very new. But the moment when you write a plan, you know, you're all policymakers, so you know about the power of plans. You know, what can words do? You write it down. 5 years later, there's incubators, there's a lot of entrepreneurs. So the same happens with entrepreneurs writing a business plan. It's something magical. We help them with that. And then here you see Bernd Vezel in his own headquarters. This was the kickoff conference of the European Creative Business Network. Together with Bernd Vezel and Anna-Maria Wills from the UK, we all had the same idea, and it's a very simple idea. Like, there's places opening up all around Europe, creative incubators, creative quarters, cultural places as well. If they all open their doors to each other, it's very easy for them to connect. Like the World Trade Centers of the world do the same. You rent space in one place and you can go to all other World Trade Centers if you like. You know, that's what our vision was about. And you see all these people around us, they were the first to step into this, but now we've already have over 40 partners around Europe. And the central message of my presentation today is that I would love to invite you all also to become a partner. So I'll get into that later, and also the reason why. For now, I wonder what you think about this message. All entrepreneurs are creative, not all creatives are entrepreneurs. I see somebody nodding his head. How many of you agree? Can I see some hands? That's like more and more hands going up, 80% or something. Somebody saying this is stupid, totally stupid. I wanna say that this is a stupid message. I don't agree. Yeah. All right, Bernd. Now, I think this was the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce in Rotterdam once said this when it was all about creative economy. And I think this is a big issue because there was once in the first incubator I started up, there was this guy making animation movies for Essex, you know, the sports shoes brand. And he was really like, you know, if Essex doesn't find me, Essex has a problem. I don't mind. I just like to make great movies and go on all night and, you know, put all my energy and time into the movies. But I don't want to make any time in finding clients or building a business or, you know, managing people. So in that sense, you really have to know who you're dealing with and what the people want that are in your sector or in your cluster. Because they can do stuff like this. And I think creativity really is something that, you know, creates wonderful experiences. For example, the iPhone, you've heard probably, I mean, I love it. You don't need any manual or anything. You open it, you turn it on, and you love it instantly. So back to the Creative Factory, because I think I might have a bit of this might be a good example. I'm also advising Bilbao now and the city of Eindhoven on this, the city of Siena. like the model we made is a model that's very interesting, I think, because usually incubators eat up a lot of money. There's almost no incubator that can survive without subsidy, without sponsorships. So there's a big problem in that, because to have a business model that says give me money for the rest of our lives is not a really sustainable one. At least that's what we thought in the beginning. So we said we are going to make a company that's going to rent 2,500 meters of office space, and then we are going to rent it out to entrepreneurs, and we'll do it at low cost, like 111 euros a month, gets you a flex desk, so a desk to work on, super fast glass fiber internet, locker, meeting rooms, a reception, post office, mailbox, but also coaching and training. So 111 euros a month for a flex desk. The most expensive desk, where you have the great view, is 220 euros if you want your own space. So that's a really low price, and the reason we can do that is that we bring a lot of companies in one space together, so 3 to 12 companies share a space. But the other reason is the partners you see on the bottom right. So we said we don't want to have like 100% funding from a city or from one governmental budget line. We are far more happy having a lot of different partners to rely on. So the top 4 partners, they pay 25,000 euros a year for the partnership. For example, the Rabobank is the biggest commercial bank in Holland. They get a meeting room back for the money, and also every new entrepreneur we send to them for a talk about their financial situation, about their growth plans. So what do entrepreneurs do when they start up? They choose a bank. So for a bank, it's a very interesting moment to be at, and especially this bank, the Rabobank, is a farmer's bank. So they are not so hip and creative. So being in the creative factory helps their image a lot. Then we have the Hogeschool Rotterdam as a partner, which is the higher professional education in Rotterdam. We also have the lower professional education and the Erasmus University, the one I came from, so it was great to have them aboard as well. And over 3,000 students a year now do internships in the Creative Factory, get education there, they organize events, they do research. So that's an enormous number. We, our promise to the city was we would have 50 a year. So it's really great, and I think for these companies and these entrepreneurs, it's very good to have all these students come over, because they bring in new ideas. And for them it's also, usually interns are the first step into managing people. You can try stuff out on them, unfortunately for the interns sometimes. And then you can hire the best of them part-time, so it's really for entrepreneurs in an important way. The big thing, the secret we have for these 3,000 students is the fact that we have one project leader, one entry point to these institutions. For example, Albeda has 360 different educations. So how does an entrepreneur find its way there? He doesn't have to know. He just calls up Wietske or goes to her, and then he asks, saying like, I have this assignment, this research I want to do, and then she will find out if it's communication or arts academy or it's media and design. They will find the right person for it. So I think that can be very interesting. And you can also do it as a barter deal. The other educational institutions don't pay. We have KPMG and ARA. ARA is a top 5 advertising agency. So they help advise the creatives on their creativity. And KPMG helps on going international when collaborations can also become quite complicated between different companies working together. Then we have Vestia and Pact op Zuid. Vestia is a housing corporation, and Pact op Zuid is the regional development agency for the south side of Rotterdam, which is sort of the ugly duck. We're surrounded by some of the worst neighborhoods in Holland, but there's actually also a lot of fun in the neighborhoods, I must say. Our next step, an international creative hub. That's what I want to talk about, but first we go into Holland. Together with these 4 other creative quarters in Holland, we started up the Dutch Creative Residency Network, sort of a blueprint for the European network and a way to find out, like, does cooperation also work within a country? And the answer is yes, happily. We're now 1.5 years on the way. We have 2 other residencies aboard, and we now want to grow into 15, 20 total. These are the founders in the Westergasfabriek, where also the Amsterdam Fashion Week is at, the big events, a lot of cultural organizations there, but also movie recording studios. Bing 36 is an old factory in The Hague. They have over 150 companies inside, so theater academy and stuff like that. Then you have the Creative Factory again. Here's the pudding fabriek, like the custard factory in Groningen, started up by entrepreneurs themselves who wanted to rent a big space together. Then we have Stripe S, old Philips factory, over 250 companies in there. Big events as well. The Dutch Design Week is going on there as of now. Westergasfabriek in Amsterdam, I told you about. So this is really the way the Dutch network works, and this is the message I have for you again. Like, this European Creative Business Network is an open network now founded by 11 partners already. Also the city of Amsterdam and Eindhoven joined in. The city of Siena and also the city of Lugano in Switzerland. So we're now 11 partners, and we're looking for more partners to grow. And I want to say that for like entrepreneurs and for creative quarters or cultural residencies, participation is free. So we want to make the barrier to entry as low as possible. Entrepreneurs can get their companies online and join the network. Cultural and creative residencies as well. Only the agencies and cities and governments that have the money to support this industry, they pay. So you can become a partner for 500 euros a year already and organize your own creative trade mission. You can also become a board member and join the board of the foundation for 4,500 euros. And what does this network do? Well, the main purpose of the European Creative Business Network is to contribute to establishing the EU as an accessible, effective and rewarding single market for creative and cultural entrepreneurs. That's the good thing about having some UK people on board. You get wonderful English words. So accessible, effective and rewarding single market is actually what the European Union wants, of course, but something that is not really going on for cultural and creative entrepreneurs, because they're usually, so fragmented. And as we heard from Bernd just now, this is not going to change. We don't want to build like a new Philips or a new Samsung in this sector. The fact that they are so small is their strength. You've seen companies in Holland in the 70s were like 30, 40 people big. And now in only a couple of years ago, they were around 7 people. So you see also in the other companies, the whole industry, companies are getting smaller and smaller. And that's what you see in the Creative Factory as well. The end point is all people working by themselves, no secretaries, no expensive cars, or it might be an expensive car, but then it's not a lease car brought in by your boss. It's your own car. So in the end, that's a very effective and also innovative structure. What are the aims of the ECBN? We want to increase access for entrepreneurs to do business and collaborate across Europe. Once again, we have the word collaboration. Come on. Strengthen spillover effects, because that's a big issue, of course. I mean, when you put like a lot of lawyers and business guys in a room with creatives, I usually see like a cocktail that doesn't mix, You can shake it, but it will still be green on the one side and red on the other side. So like you have the suits and the ties, and then... So that's something we think is really important. And as Bernd said, if you have them over the bridge once and they really experience like the effect, then you can really get them to participate and enjoy the fruits of the creative sector and the cultural sector. Overcome key weaknesses. No, you've seen a lot of that in the last couple of days. Stimulate the research, which is definitely needed, and also to show the power and the strength of the sector. And then promote the value of CCIs to EU member states and EU institutions. We're very happy that that in Brussels the story and the power of the creative industry is finally really coming up, also with the European Creative Industry Alliance, and trying to make a European strategy for the creative industry. But more should be done, and now the big plans are being made, of course, for 2013, 2020. So I hope we can all make a big statement to get a bigger influence for our sector in that, and also, of course, for the cultural part of the sector, because that's big power there and big innovation power. Well, Barroso also said this, like the creative industry should keep Europe ahead in the game. So what does the ECBN do? I'll get into that. It's all about exchange. It's about an online community. It's about trade missions, and then, of course, policy forum and communication. The one thing that might be very interesting for you is that, when you would come over to Rotterdam, you would think like, what is going on there? What can I get, and what time should I come over? Well, you can wake me up in the middle of the night, even after a couple of beers, like last night, and I will tell you, like, okay, the end of January, beginning of February is the film festival, and in September is the cultural month, and so if you tap into local information, you don't need a big research agency to think like, what can I get in London? You can just call up another entrepreneur in your industry, and because usually the companies are quite small and open to collaboration, they don't feel like Philips, like, why would I get Samsung over to Holland and explain them what the market is like? These companies are not so big that they run the market, so they're very open usually to collaboration, especially when they're in a residency, because then they already have a lot of other companies around them, so they're more inclined to work together. So we think it's very important to have local contact points, and that can really say, this is the right time to come. I could introduce you to this guy, and we think it's good to have them at a city region level, but also at the residency level. So I can say, like, come to the Creative Factory, and I will get you in contact with these 3 architects or other people that are interesting for you. Online community is being built. It will be on in November. And what will be a central point is the fact that you can meet each other. You log on via LinkedIn or Facebook, so not another profile, and you find a European agenda of network events. And that's something we think is really lacking now. You have a lot of local agendas, but we're going to combine those so that you can really find out, like, okay, this is when you're a designer, I have to be in Italy at the Salone Mobile, and then I can go to Dutch Design Week in Eindhoven, I can go to London then, or can go to Istanbul then. So it's really easy to find the right event. And usually what happens with me is I read about the Design Week, for example, when it's next week. But if you're a designer, you would have had to apply for an award or for a space at the Design Week half a year before, maybe even earlier. So we're gonna create emails saying like, okay, you're a designer, you should apply now, you can apply for this award, you can apply for this. And this could really speed up people's careers by years, It takes time to get to know the field. So if you know this 1 year or 2 years earlier, you can really get talent to speed up their growth. Creative trade missions, of course, an ancient old method. You get a group together to come over, as we're doing here in Tallinn. We just did one in September at Picnic with over 70 delegates. We did one in Bristol. So that's a very important way. I wanted to put in some pictures, but I will ask you to go online and have a look at those. We'll also at the conference website have this presentation, but also the invitation to become a member as an entrepreneur, as a residency, or as a partner organization, a development agency, a city. We really look forward to get more partners in Eastern Europe, because we know there's a lot of new developments here, residencies being opened up. But we've been researching, and it's difficult to find them for us. So it would be great if you have some contacts for us to really connect, like also the East and the West in Europe, and create growth. Because, for example, I just heard a story by a Japanese entrepreneur I spoke to. He's in Tokyo. He has a team in America as well. He's into mobile communications, and his development team is here in Estonia. So all the way from Tokyo, he doesn't want his programmers there. He just has them here in Estonia. And I think that's the power of what's going on. I also heard from a Portuguese company. They do a lot of work for an advertising agency in London. In London they design the strategy and the website, and it's being built in Porto. There's a couple of examples that could really work, using the comparative advantages. I think we can do a lot more in that sense. So I look forward to collaborate with you all, and I hope you really have a wonderful excursion in the afternoon. I look forward to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Do you want to? Thank you so much. I mean, it's a fitting finale to a conference where the word collaboration has been used so much. Is a direct invitation to collaborate, and hopefully some of you, if not all of you, will take up Leo on his invitation, at least to play, if not to fully collaborate. So please do ask Leo any questions about what that might involve, and let's see what happens, really. So would anybody like to respond to what Leo's just been talking about?
Everybody's interested in a drink, I guess.
Yeah, everyone's always interested in a drink. What's one of the joys of this conference?
Standard ask.
Yeah, the Andrew moment.
Yeah, and they're not even paying me for this. Is this on? Oh yeah. Great presentation. Really inspiring, and a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't know about. So it's fantastic. I kind of am old enough to have lived through the music industry years, where the small independents kind of provided the talent and the startup and all of that, and then went swallowed up by the big boys. And I just wondered whether there's a danger of this happening here, because basically you could argue that your model is actually like free R&D for multinationals and larger companies that will come along at the appropriate moment and take your best talent and take your companies and turn them into something else. Is that a danger, do you think?
Well, it depends. I think the biggest thing is that if an entrepreneur is happy with that step in their life at that moment, then who am I to say no? But I think we've had that, like with Are, the advertising agency. They've offered a couple of entrepreneurs a job, a good, well-paying job, but they declined. They love their freedom, and they love to go on in their own direction and with their own plan in their head. So I think it's all about knowing where you want